Chapter 1324, Lead the Evil Around. Chapter 1324, Lead the Evil Around. The void shattered was smoothened like a mirror. Everything slowly resumed its normal status. Shi Yang looked focused as he used the magical understanding of his space power Upanishad for many years to mend the space and make it flat and smooth. The torn space was like a closing wound. Countless flood currents from outer space were stopped outside. Shi Yang's wisps of soul consciousness like space sabers flew around the area. They collected small pieces of shattered space and guided them to chaotic currents outside the star area. After 1 hour, the large pit caused by Shi Yang's and Spark's attacks had been fixed. Fiery Rain Star area finally could avoid the shattering and disappearing consequences. He checked around and looked at the battleships of the God Clan. He smiled. His mind flickered and his acupuncture points suddenly had a tremendous suction force like gigantic whales sucking water. The torrential energy from the dead warriors hadn't vanished yet. They invisibly streamed toward Shi Yang's acupuncture points and filled them once again. The familiar swelling pain reappeared. Brimming with energy, Shi Yang felt so refreshed. He couldn't help but laugh cheerfully. "Is it really funny?" Wedderson's peculiar voice arose. His rough body shot out of the deep abyss. He reached Shi Yang in almost just a blink of an eye. Obviously, he didn't come with good intentions. At this moment, the survivors of the God Clan were running madly toward the sea territory. And even the warriors of Fiery Rainstar area were heading there. Only Shi Yang hovered in this area when Wedderson came with his flames of anger. However, he didn't strike Shi Yang immediately. He maliciously glared at Shi Yang. All of a sudden, his eyes showed a gleam of reluctant sorrow. Looking at the pieces of corpses around the area, Wedderson asked in a low-pitched voice, "Did they die because of me?" Thornton's team of the Beckelfeld hadn't known how Wedderson killed his warriors when he got mad. But now, they knew. To know this, they had to pay a terrifyingly bloody price. Wedderson didn't know what would happen after he burst out with his insanity, either. However, he knew that many people died because of him when he woke up. This time, he understood it more clearly because this course of madness had been so long to the point that he felt like it was almost perpetual. Eventually, he got a hold of himself. Just that gleam of time had made him understand many, many things. Wedderson wasn't a bloodthirsty character. When he knew that many of his subordinates had to perish because of his madness, he couldn't accept it. Although they often looked at him with disdain concealed in their eyes, they were the members of the hidden god vessels. They had been with him for years. More or less, he still had some feelings for them. "No, the people died because you were mostly in the death trap inside the abyss. They accounted for around 1/4 of the total deaths." Shi Yang frowned and said calmly, "Another 1/4 died because of the impact between Spark and me. We caused a spatial explosion and guided the chaotic space currents here. Some of them exploded to death while the others drowned in turbulent space currents." "It's you." Wedderson roared like a wild, hurt beast. "I know it's you. You came into my head like a nightmare spirit. You've pumped the killing desire into my head and made me not able to control myself. You've triggered the evil energy in my body. It's because of you. All because of you. Because of you, my warriors were killed." Wedderson roared and thundered. The evil aura burst out from his eyes like a flame. He looked as if he was about to fall into insanity one more time. "True. I did all of those." Shi Yang didn't deny this and chuckled. While talking, a wisp of his soul consciousness shot out like the electric beam. His soul consciousness flew toward the sea territory of Fiery Rainstar area. It pierced through layers of space barriers. After a flash, it could cross billions of miles. Blood Devil was standing on a battleship and focusing on the dark horizon ahead. He was so restlessly anxious. He wanted to get into the sea territory as fast as possible. He considered that Fiery Rainstar area was about to break. It would be erased from this vast sea of stars soon. If they couldn't leave before the star area was obliterated, he and the reinforcements from Agate Star area would vanish into ashes altogether. He could never accept this. Suddenly, a familiar wisp of soul consciousness came to him. He felt Shi Yang's aura in this. Blood Devil was startled. He immediately caught it. That flow of soul consciousness came into his sea of consciousness without resisting and sent him a message. Bewildered for seconds, Blood Devil laughed loudly. He didn't care about the other astounding warriors standing by him and pitched his voice, "Stop. All of you. Return to the hexagonal starland. The situation is over. Everything is okay now." At the same time, in the direction of hexagonal starland, Shi Yang wore a severe face while looking at Wedderson, who was about to burst out again. All of a sudden, he asked, "Do you believe I can kill you right now?" Wedderson was about to sink into his mad world again, but he shouted when he heard Shi Yang. "You can't kill me. Your erosive energy can erode the space, planets, and everything, but it does nothing to me because I can swallow it directly. This power Upanishad comes from Gado. Gado was one of the Cortage of 8 and the power Upanishad I got is from Gado's master." Shi Yang snorted and then continued, "You shouldn't think that the good encounter that helped you with Gado's inheritance is enough to destroy this whole world. You're just at second sky of incipient God realm. Even if you use all of your energy, you still have no way to wiggle under the devouring power Upanishad I inherited from Bloodthirsty because my power Upanishad is your power Upanishad's nemesis." Wedderson looked perplexed, his eyes blurry. "Gado? Who's Gado? I don't know him. I don't know what you're talking about." Shi Yang frowned and looked at him, his eyes like sabers stabbing Wedderson's heart. After a while, he was also skeptical as he found that Wedderson wasn't lying. This man with the man blood wasn't good at making cunning plans. It was Shi Yang's turn to become bewildered. "You don't know that the erosive energy in your body comes from Gado, a member of my retinue? You know nothing about it." "No, I don't," Wedderson mumbled, "and I don't want to know that." Boom. A strange power field came out of Wedderson's fist with a faint streak of erosive power. However, it was trivial compared to the time he had lost his mind. When Wedderson was in his normal condition, he was just an expert at second sky of incipient God realm. He couldn't release the evil in his heart when he was normal, so he couldn't urge the earth erosive power from Gado. This kind of attack wasn't any threat to Shi Yang. He frowned, hissed confine, and rose his hand at that power field. Unexpectedly, that magnetic field couldn't resist. Shi Yang opened his mouth and spurted a band of starlight, which then fell on Wedderson's deadly field. Countless starlight dots were sent in every direction. Wedderson immediately found that the energy he had poured into the deadly field was drained by the starlight. Shi Yang didn't dare to use negative energy because he was afraid it could stimulate Wedderson again. Mad Wedderson was dozens of times more brutal than usual. Shi Yang would have a terrible headache if he made Wedderson lose his mind. Thus, he had to control his energy carefully. "You killed so many warriors of the Breckelfeld family on the hidden god vessels. Thornton and Pargo saw that with their own eyes. To stop you, Thornton had to use the brutal extinguishing godleaf that could tear the barriers of hexagonal starland. Do you think you still can return to your Breckelfeld family? Do you think Thornton will accept you?" Shi Yang's words were like heartless arrows coldly thrusting into Wedderson's heart. Pain rose in Wedderson's heart. His eyes showed his insecure feelings. He wasn't afraid that Thornton and Pargo would retaliate him, but he was afraid that the Breckelfeld family would destroy the lifestar where his man tribe lived. It was also the reason why he knew that the Breckelfeld family had looked down on him, but he still had to submit to Thornton. As the star area where the man tribe dwelled belonged to the Breckelfeld family, Thornton just needed to spit and his mother, his relatives, would be slaughtered the same way people slaughter cattle. He couldn't stop it and he didn't have the power to stop it. Thus, he had to try his best and sacrifice his life for Thornton in the hope that Thornton would consider his loyalty and leave his man brothers and sisters in peace. Today, listening to Shi Yang's naked and ruthless explanation, his heart was chilled and his soul was filled with fear. The thought of taking revenge on Shi Yang faded from his mind. He just wanted to return to his birthplace to take his beloved ones out of there. He wanted to escape the homicide that was going to be carried out by the God clan. Since he had followed Thornton for many years, he knew how cruel and cold-blooded Thornton was. He was sure that when Thornton's hands were free, he would slaughter his homeland. Wedderson kept silent for a long time. He threw Shi Yang a malignant glance then dashed toward the sea territory. He wanted to run to his homeland as fast as possible. He had crossed his heart to protect his home and was seeking for a way for his beloved ones to live. Shi Yang's eyes sparkled strangely. He just looked at Wedderson leaving and did nothing. Shi Yang was sure that Wedderson couldn't catch up with Thornton and Pargo. He was also sure that after Thornton had returned to ancient Godstar area safely, he would order to clear Wedderson's homeland. Shi Yang knew Thornton would do something to vent out his anger for this worst failure. Wedderson had come to Fiery Rainstar area through the channel of the God Clan. If he wasn't dumb, when he wanted to return to his homeland, he would use the channel in the Tsunami Star. He would never pass by the God Clan. But if he took this route, he would come back late because it took more time. By the time he got home, his homeland would be already in ruins. People would have died everywhere. In such a desperate situation, he would burst out crazily again. It was what Shi Yang had expected, though. Wedderson and Gaddo should have some close relationship. Moreover, Shi Yang could feel some other evil force from Wedderson's body. That kind of force tasted like bloodthirstis aura. As Shi Yang was keeping bloodthirstis remains, he had time to study them. The aura of the remains was somehow similar to Wedderson. A character like Wedderson could become an evil weapon to deal with the God Clan. If he used it well, it could be a big help to the bloodthirsty force. But the premise was that he had to make Wedderson hate the God Clan and send his flames of anger to the God Clan. He believed that Thornton would help him achieve this goal soon. What he needed to do was to guide Wedderson well and make him walk toward his side. Chapter 1325, He's My Man. Chapter 1325, He's My Man, _ Wedderson had given up everything and dashed toward the sea territory. In his heart, his mother and his tribe were more precious than taking Shi Yang's life. Shi Yang swayed slightly and disappeared from this area. Shortly after, he landed on hexagonal starland and stood outside Black Angle Star, the God-defending Union's headquarters. The soil on Black Angle Star was jet black. The surface of this planet had many ponds, lakes, and dark abysses with natural, toxic gases. Evidently, the conditions here were extremely harsh that ordinary people couldn't survive here. However, the earth and heaven energy on this star was really thick with many precious natural products like black stones or ores and many different kinds of floras. All of them were very valuable. The more toxic gas it had, the more rare and precious products the poisonous lake and abyss had. It was the reason why Black Angle Star gained more affection from High Realm warriors of Fiery Rainstar area. Many big clans in this star area had chosen this planet to build their bases. Shi Yang stood atop a massive mountain on Black Angle Star and looked at the luxurious, grand palaces around. Suddenly, he squinted and then sat down cross-legged, facing the mysterious dark sea of stars. Underneath him was the vast land of Black Angle Star with many lakes and toxic animals. Slowly, he closed his eyes, his sole consciousness checking his body as he wandered around the acupuncture points. At this moment, the abundant energy taken in his acupuncture points were filtered and refined by the vortexes. Shortly after, the mysterious, pure energy was produced and he was able to use it directly or refine his body. After he had reached second sky of incipient God realm, the filtering speed of his acupuncture points had accelerated. As he had expanded the room there, the refining speed was much faster. After a while, Shi Yang found a large amount of strange energy gushing out of the acupuncture points. This kind of mysterious energy moved and filled his frame and flesh, using a strange method to quench his entire body. He had a premonition that this sort of mysterious energy could make his body evolve continuously. His form would be more perfect. Ming Hao used to tell them that bloodthirsty was the combined essence of the blood from the four great creatures including Immortal Demon Clan, God Clan, Imperial Dark Tribe, and Heavenly Monster Tribe. He was at the most perfect form and was at the acme of evolution. Bloodthirsty's body and blood was the trend of evolution to the warriors. In this age, the experts quenched their bodies and aimed to reach the intensity of bloodthirsty's body one day. However, not many people could make their bodies stronger from time to time. Only after breaking through to a new realm could they use the earth and heaven energy or divine crystals with the great, sudden change of the god power to refine their bodies another time. Typically, even if they could gather an enormous amount of energy, they couldn't make it fuse into their bodies and veins. Anyway, Shi Yang found that when the mysterious energy moved out of the acupuncture points, a small part of it disappeared along the way it flowed through his body. He knew where it had gone. It hid in Shi Yang's bones, veins, and even blood to quietly and subtly change him. It made him approach the perfect form and the most desired form of a warrior. Suddenly, Shi Yang thought that perhaps Bloodthirst's origin body wasn't perfect. He had used the devouring power Upanishad to slowly nurture and build it up little by little until he'd made it perfect. This thought moved him. Shi Yang appreciated this moment more. He tried to guide the mysterious energy moving through his entire body. Anyway, the energy generated by his acupuncture points was too much. It was over the endurance of his bones, veins, and blood. Thus, the energy in his body now made him shine like an energy ball. Any warrior could see the magical energy fluctuations from this ball. When he had accumulated energy to a particular level, he had the feeling that his body was about to explode again. At this moment, he felt Blood Devil's aura. Pondering for a while, he let out a low shout and the bunches of light shot out from his body, heading to an area far away. As soon as Blood Devil, Ka2, and Benny had returned to hexagonal Starland, the blood mark on their foreheads glowed. They were so thrilled. The streams of energy Shi Yang had released flooded the subordinates of the bloodthirsty force who had cultivated one of the 8 great power Upanishads. More battleships came and anchored by Black Angle Star in hexagonal Starland. Yunnan of the God-defending Union felt happy after they survived the Big Kalpa. Previously, she was skeptical because she was afraid that Blood Devil would take them to the chaotic space basin where warriors of Fiery Rainstar area were going to be buried altogether. Jar Duo, an expert cultivating space power Upanishad of Tool and Potion Pavilion, had affirmed that the space nodes recovered, otherwise, she would never have dared to return. Today, Yunnan took Yushan, Xiao Yen, and the leaders of the God-defending Union on the battleships and returned to hexagonal Starland. They found so many corpses of the God Clan warriors and the void looked as if nothing had happened. They couldn't help but laugh and cheer, congratulating this inexplicable victory. Until now, they didn't know why the God Clan had retreated or why there were so many warriors that died here. They didn't know why the deadly spatial hole appeared, either. But they knew that the Breckelfeld family and the Austin family of the God Clan had to run helter-skelter to the sea territory as if a fire burned their bottoms. They hastily went back to ancient Godstar area. They knew the threat that was hung above their heads had finally lifted up. All was because of Shi Yang who came suddenly. At this moment, Yunnan had no doubt about the new master of Bloodthirsty Force. She knew his capacity now. Each warrior of Fiery Rainstar area was respectful when mentioning Shi Yang. The experts gathered on the biggest mountain on Black Angle Star. Blood Devil and the others were gathering by Shi Yang to receive energy he bestowed them. Blood Devil now had a blood cocoon shrouding him. The life energy shot out from him radiantly. Benny and Ka2 were also shaking, their faces red. The 3 of them were the warriors Shi Yang had cared especially. They received most of his energy. Time ticked by hurriedly. Yunnan and the others were patiently waiting for them to finish the energy transmission. They were waiting for the death and life rotating bridge to complete. Xia Xin Yang, Feng Han, and Lin Xin were on the mountain too. They were so surprised when they saw the exclusive technique of dividing energy from the bloodthirsty force. Zi Yarrow was there too. She was wearing a light purple dress that showcased her elegant and sexy body like a beautiful lilac. The young men of Divine Light had considered her as their dream lover. When she was in Fiery Rainstar area, many people had tried their best to earn her favors with the hope that she would give them just a look. In the crowd, Zi Yarrow quietly watched Shi Yang send his energy. Her bright eyes sparkled and sent ripples of light. "Miss Zi Yarrow, can I talk with you for a moment?" A handsome and elegant warrior of Fiery Rainstar area came to her and said humbly, "I really appreciate Miss Zi Yarrow's reinforcement to our star area. If you don't mind, I can take you around to see some magnificent sights of our Fiery Rainstar area. May I have that privilege?" This young man was the only son of one of the deputy hegemons of the God Clan. He was one of the new shining stars of Fiery Rainstar area. With third sky of ethereal god realm cultivation base and a big background, he thought he was a good match to Zi Yao. He had always tried his best to earn her affection. Then, the ripples of light in Zi Yao's bright eyes slightly trembled. She beamed and gently rose one finger pointing at Shi Yang. Her face blushed when she said, "He's my man. Do you still want to date me?" The young man was bewildered. He forced a smile, bowed to her, and then said sincerely, "My bad. If you had mentioned your relationship with him earlier, I wouldn't have said more words to you." He then looked at Shi Yang, his face respectful and admiring. However, he didn't have any gleam of jealousy. Because Shi Yang came here to save his star area, which also saved him from an exiled life, his family still had glory and his family members were safe. Looking at the young man backing off with respect, Zi Yao smiled and looked at Shi Yang, her face content. "Perhaps, if you can be with that man, you'll be happier." Suddenly, a beautiful figure came to her and said to her in a low voice like a sigh. Zi Yao was surprised. Then, she smiled naturally. "Why do you say that?" Xin Yang wore a thin silk green dress. She was as mesmerizing as a pure and noble orchid. However, her exquisite face had a gleam of sadness. "Because that bastard has been wandering all the time. He won't stop because of you or for you. If you want to stay with him, you should prepare to be used to endless loneliness. Have you prepared yourself for that?" She studied Zi Yao. Zi Yao smiled gently. "Of course, I have. When I first met him, I already knew he was not just a normal person. He will rise like a kite with the wind one day. But I have never expected that he could reach such a height. That year, when we came to Agate Star area from Raging Flame Star area, I had made up my mind. I haven't changed anything since then." Pausing for a while, she beamed again. "Have you ever regretted?" Xin Yang shook her head, her charming eyes gazing at Shi Yang. She breathed, "When we were in our homeland, I've promised him one thing. And I will never change my words." "I admire you," Zi Yao said all of a sudden. Xin Yang was surprised. "For what?" "You and he, are good enough. I can see it." "But I haven't," Zi Yao's cheek blushed. Her beautiful eyes had a mesmerizing light as she couldn't finish. Xin Yang smiled beautifully, snorted, and then scolded. "That bastard has a bunch of evil thoughts. I think you can capture him easily." "I hoped that he could take the initiate." Zi Yao looked a little down and sighed. "Well, then you have to wait until he has free time. Currently, he's very busy and, he will be very busy in the future too. You still have time to prepare. Just wait for him then." Xin Yang pouted her lips, her voice sour. She seemed discontent because Shi Yang had never had free time with his busy fighting schedule. "I can tell that you're supporting me. Why? Shouldn't you try your best to break this? We're women, but you sound so generous. What do you have in your mind?" Zi Yao was astounded. She couldn't make it through because she and Xin Yang had often competed without any agreement. They didn't get along as well as they looked. Today, Xin Yang suddenly changed her attitude. Zi Yao found it confusing. She wondered why Xin Yang had changed her mind like that. "I can't hold him by myself. Perhaps, with you, we can make him settle down," Xin Yang sighed weakly. Chapter 1326, Warm Their Hearts. Chapter 1326, Warm Their Hearts. On an imposing mountain on Black Angle Star in hexagonal starland, lights of energy shot out like bright streams flying toward warriors cultivating 8 great power Upanishads. Blood Devil, Benny, Ka Tuor, and the others with the blood mark were sitting cross-legged and receiving energy through the blood mark on their foreheads. Their reactions weren't similar. As Blood Devil was an immortal demon, the energy light shot toward him and turned into robust vitality that suited his life power Upanishad. His immortal demon blood surged and created a blood membrane that covered him. Blood Devil's life energy fluctuated terrifyingly inside the blood membrane. He was like an erupting volcano, indeed. Compared to him, the others looked quite calm. Benny was a dark warrior. Light energy came to him and turned into grey wisps seeping into his soul altar. He felt like he was using a hot spring to nurture his soul altar and refine his destruction power Upanishad. As Ka Tuor cultivated Chaos Power Upanishad, when that energy seeped into his body, a massive magnetic field emerged and pulled the trees and rocks around him. Even the guests came to join his magnetic field. All stormed toward him strangely, but he had managed to control them skillfully. Now, all the debris was moving around him. Many other warriors with bloodthirsty power Upanishads had different reactions to this energy. The ones with the dark power Upanishad had disappeared completely in darkness they had created that no light could intrude. The warriors with the corpse chi had grey mist hovering around their bodies without dispersing. They had a cold and yin aura too. The other warriors with the rest power Upanishads had also shown their marvelous features. However, evidently, all of them had their energy increase greatly. Many of them were subordinates of Xian He, Frederick, and Ming Hao. This time, they received the order to come and support the battle in Fiery Rainstar area. They had only considered Xian He, Frederick, and Ming Hao as their real chiefs of bloodthirsty force. They hadn't had much respect for Shi Yang as they knew he was just a puppet Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick had built. They had even disdained him. However, at this moment, each of them felt so lucky. They felt lucky that they were assigned to help Fiery Rainstar area and not the others. They felt lucky because they had accompanied Shi Yang. The energy Shi Yang had bestowed them was the same amount if they spent dozens or even 100 years accumulating. The pure energy got through their bloodmark and excited them a lot. But what made them astounded the most was that the energy poured into them through the bloodmark could be fused perfectly with the power Upanishad they cultivated. It felt like this kind of energy had been customized for each of them. They finally recognized that even Shi Yang's realm wasn't profound enough and his attainment wasn't as outstanding as Xian He, Frederick, or Ming Hao. Shi Yang had the inheritance from bloodthirsty forces' previous master, Bloodthirsty. The devouring power Upanishad was the root of the bloodthirsty force. One day, when Shi Yang had reached the immortal realm, he was able to replace Ming Hao's team and finally gained the recognition from every member of the bloodthirsty force. Because of his power Upanishad, he could lead everybody. The devouring power Upanishad could create strong subordinates by increasing their realms and power. In their hearts, they had gradually approved Shi Yang. This kind of approval grew alongside with his growing realm. After an unknown, long time, Shi Yang woke up first. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw Zi Yarrow and Xia Xinyang standing in front of him, their beautiful eyes studying him. His heart felt warm. He smiled and got up. Where are the others? At this moment, Lin Xin, Yunnan, Yushan, and Feng Han weren't here. Some warriors guarded around the area to prevent the unauthorized from disturbing this area. Besides him and the warriors cultivating the 8 power Upanishads, there were only Xia Xinyang and Zi Yarrow here. It seemed like they had stayed to guard him and waited for him to wake up. This time, you've taken a long time to send energy to your subordinates. The others have many things to do. They can't stay here to wait for you all the time. They came back to take care of other matters of business. Zi Yarrow was like a beautiful, moist flower. She smiled naturally, her eyes twinkling. She had purposely adjusted her hair. Her soft hair draped but it didn't look messy on her temples. She was wearing a tight, purple dress that lingered close to her skin and exposed her white shoulders and deep cleavage between her dazzling white breasts. Every part of her was so inviting and it made people get drawn to her. She was the most beautiful flower in Raging Flame Star area. Even though she had moved to Agate Star area, her beauty didn't decrease. As her realm had been increasing, her glamour became more mesmerizing like an aging, fragrant wine. Staying by her side, Xia Xinyang was like a quiet, elegant orchid. Her exquisite, oval face always had a faint and cold natural look like water. The two beauties were beautiful in different ways but they were both dazzling. At this moment, they stood shoulder by shoulder, beaming. Shi Yang looked at them and shivered. His soul suddenly had a desire of staying peace and calm. He suddenly felt shameful and guilty to the loved ones standing in front of him now. His entire life had been dedicated for fighting and reaching the acme of his martial path. He didn't have a lot of free time to settle down and enjoy his life. He didn't dare to express his feelings and love for others. The two women standing in front of him now were the closest to him, but the time they had had together was very little. "Are you leaving now?" Xia Xinyang looked at him quietly. Although her voice was clear, her eyes were glum. She knew that the situation of the universe was still very sensitive. The war happened everywhere like in Fiery Rainstar area. As the new master of the bloodthirsty force, Shi Yang didn't have time to rest. She knew that Shi Yang had to leave to go to another star area to fight a bloody war as soon as he woke up. Logically, she understood. However, she was still discontent. It was a woman's nature, so it wasn't something she could change. "You want to leave again?" Zi Yaro's smile was still bright, but it sounded reluctant too. The waves of light in her beautiful eyes gently rippled and showed her begrudging worries. Looking at the two famous women from everywhere they came, a warm flow of water flowed through Shi Yang's heart. He pondered for a few seconds and then beamed at them. "Nah, I'm not hurried. It's okay to take a little rest. Even if I want to leave, I have to wait until Blood Devil, Benny, and Ka all wake up." The gloomy gleam in their eyes cleared instantly. The two women blushed and bit their succulent lower lips. They nodded to him. "Sir, our hegemon advised that if you wake up, you should give us face by visiting the Union. She wants to take all the warriors of Fiery Rainstar area to thank you for your support." A warrior of Fiery Rainstar area wore a respectful face, bowing modestly and begging him. Xia Xinyang and Zi Yaro showed long, begrudging, and disappointed faces. Shi Yang frowned slightly, looking at him and talking faintly. "No need to hurry." With a glimpse of teasing in his eyes, he said suddenly, "I'm going to take you two to do some sightseeing. Yeah, it could benefit your realms too." As soon as he finished, two space slits appeared underneath Xia Xinyang and Zi Yaro. The outer space streamers shot out radiantly. They then scared the women. They paled, but before they could scream, the sticky, tentacle-like bands of streamers had already pulled them into the space slits. When the two slits closed, their frightened screams came. They had just been delivered to a chaotic space basin. The guard of the god-defending Union had second sky of ethereal god realm. He looked bewildered when he saw the two women disappearing into the space slits. "I'm really sorry. I agreed to take them to do some sightseeing. Please explain to your hegemon for me." "Oh right, tell Feng Han and Lin Xin too. They aren't bound to me. They can make any decision related to their forces. I won't interfere with their own businesses," said Shi Yang. Feng Han, Lin Xin, Bath, Gut, Yang Kai, and Bing Jie were the leaders of the forces from Agate Star area. This time, they had to spend a lot of effort to take their forces here to reinforce Fiery Rainstar area in resisting the God Clan. In the past, Agate Star area and Fiery Rainstar area didn't have any connection or trade with each other. To these two star areas, the clear connection would strengthen both of them. Fiery Rainstar area had many cultivating materials that Agate Star area couldn't produce, and at the same time, Agate Star area had many rare items that Fiery Rainstar area didn't have. After the recent cooperation, the forces of the two star areas began to discuss the partnership between them. Lin Xin, Yang Kai, and Bing Jie were negotiating the business with the forces of Fiery Rainstar area. They wanted to trade with Fiery Rainstar area, but they weren't so sure about Shi Yang's attitude toward this mutual cooperation. Shi Yang represented bloodthirsty force, the most powerful and mysterious force in this universe. If he wanted to interfere with the business in Fiery Rainstar area, Feng Han, Lin Xin, and the others wouldn't want to work with him. It wasn't something they wanted to see. Shi Yang had to make himself clear and erase the unnecessary worries that Feng Han and Lin Xin had. Their cooperation with Fiery Rainstar area would mutually benefit them. "I understand. I will tell them your words." The guard bowed to Shi Yang. He admired and complimented Shi Yang a lot. Although Shi Yang was the new master of the bloodthirsty force, he was always tender and polite to others. He didn't sound arrogant at all. The guard sighed as he saw that Shi Yang had a romantic relationship with Xia Xinyang and Zi Yaro, the two famous beauties who had charmed many warriors in the two-star areas including him. In his thoughts, only a character like Shi Yang could be an equal match to Zi Yaro and Xia Xinyang. The guard wasn't jealous. He had just admired and wished them the best because Shi Yang had come here to seize their star area back from the bloody mouth of the God Clan. The man left. The respect he had for Shi Yang in his face didn't disappear. Deep in his mind, he had considered Shi Yang the future lord of this cosmos. The conversation with Shi Yang today would be his unforgettable asset later. Shi Yang chuckled. His thoughts flickered and he turned into a beam of light, disappearing at his spot. He had directly entered the chaotic space basin. Chapter 1327, Outer Space Divine Light. Chapter 1327, Outer Space Divine Light. Underscore. So many bunches of brilliant lights crossed each other, expanding in this strange but magnificent land. Not far from them, the shaking explosions arose when many unknown meteorolites exploded, sending shockwaves everywhere. They made the void like the expanding, twisting balloon for a while. There was no earth and heaven energy to absorb in this area. Desolation and silence was the eternal host of this place. Explosions, deadly gusts, sharp wind sabers, chaotic currents, and strange seas had created this place, the chaotic space basin. This area was infinite. No one had ever found its boundary, and no one could ever investigate the magical mysteries in the chaotic space basin. Usually, only the warriors cultivating space power Upanishad could survive in such an area. Of course, the high existences at the profound realm like the immortal realm experts could still survive here if they could find the way to get in and out. However, they had to face the dangers in every minute. At this moment, Xia Xinyang and Zi Yarrow were staying inside an energy light cage hovering above a gorgeous, strange land. Looking at the surroundings, their beautiful eyes sparkled. Right in front of them, waves of explosions had created the blinding halos, which was so beautiful like the most marvelous firework performance. They felt so touched. The magnificent scenery here wasn't something they could find in any star area. Although it was so deadly dangerous, it was filled with miracles and mysteries that could somehow amuse people. However, they had to consume their god power rapidly. Although they didn't move, they needed to use the god power to create the light cage to protect themselves. The outer space streamers here could attack them and shatter their bodies in any minute. It's so beautiful. What we see here should exist only in the dream. I could never think of how marvelous it is. Zi Yarrow looked so fascinated. Looking at the brilliant explosions around, her beautiful eyes twinkled. Different from her, Xia Xinyang looked scared as if she was recalling bad memory. Her soft body shivered as she felt so chilled. Hey! Are you alright? Seems you are afraid of this place a lot. Zi Yarrow was surprised. Many years ago, I've had to move through the turbulent space current. It was also a space slit, developed from a broken space passage. Although it wasn't as lethal as this area, the impression I had back there, I would never forget. Xia Xinyang sighed, her face frightened as if she was replaying that piece of memory. That year, she and many warriors of the Pure Land had to use the space passage in the Ice and Fire secret domain as their last resort. That space passage had already shattered, so it led to the chaotic space basin. After they had struggled through that passage, they arrived in the shadow ghostly prison of the Agate Star area. However, not many people could make it to the safe harbor. The others had fallen inside the space current. The terrifying death traps had erased their lives. At that time, she was so much weaker than today, but the space passage they had taken had just connected to the space current for a while after it had shattered. It was safer than the area, the real chaotic space basin they were hovering now. Looking at the familiar surroundings, she recalled the painful memory, and the chilled intent flooded her. Anyway, Shi Yang suddenly appeared by her, smiling. Actually, you can stay here well. Today, you're not yourself that year. Put away this light cage and move around. I'm here. I will take care of you well. Don't worry. Forget it. Xia Xinyang shook her head, smiling begrudgingly. I don't dare to act rashly in such a place like this. You can do it, encouraged Shi Yang. With a serious face, he hissed, the memory when you got to the Agate Star area through the space passage in the Ice and Fire secret domain is an evil barrier in your heart. You don't dare to recall it. I know the abilities of your power Upanishad. You can rewind time to come back to the dusted pieces of memory. That's how you can break through continually. Those breakthroughs are based on a foundation. At that point in time in the past, You had already broken through that realm. Pausing for a while, he said, recently, you can't break through continually anymore. I can see that your god powers reached the bottleneck to break through again. Xia Xinyang changed her face when she listened to him. You can see that? Shi Yang nodded. My previous lives had reached only the first sky of incipient god realm. I don't have any piece of memory about the experiences in the breakthrough of the second sky of incipient god realm, explained Xia Xinyang. Previously, every time she broke through to the new realm, she just needed to accumulate energy. She didn't need to understand her power deeply. Because at that time, the experiences she had had from the previous lives would come to her and filled her attainment. It had saved her time and efforts, though. However, she didn't have this abnormal advantage anymore. It was because she hadn't reached the second sky of incipient god realm in her previous lives. In other words, if she wanted to break through again, she had to depend on her own efforts and her delicate understanding of the power. When she was on the reincarnation island, Dekalos had sent her the flow of pure energy. At that time, her god power was brimming. She had reached the bottleneck to break to the second sky of incipient god realm. She couldn't continue to advance her realm because of this. She didn't have the comprehension required for the second sky of incipient god realm. From now on, her cultivation depended only on her innate talents. However, the piece of memory when she came to the agate star area that year had become an evil barrier in her heart. She didn't dare to face. She didn't dare to find herself through it, so she was bound. As long as she still had this barrier, she couldn't break through again. Shi Yang wanted to bring her here to break that barrier in her mind, giving her a chance to reflect her own inner world. If you want to lift up that evil barrier, you have to open your heart. Retrieve the light cage. Move around. Don't worry. Count on me. Shi Yang guided her step by step. I'm here. You're safe. You'll be all right. The space current isn't as terrible as you think. In the past, you would be afraid of it. But now you aren't. You have me here. You can just take a walk around the place. His voice charmed her heart. With his encouragement, Xia Xinyang's cold eyes became resolute. All right. The light cage covering her vanished. Her soft body exposed in the chaotic space current. Immediately, the outer space streamers attacked her, sending the unknown energy dregs into her body. They wanted to destroy her body. That year, she had experienced the same things. That painful, familiar feeling revisited her. Her complexion changed instantly. Her natural placid face collapsed as she cried. Use your god power to wash your entire body. Use your god power to force the dregs out of your body. You must maintain a clear soul altar. At that time, your body and soul won't have a leak. Nothing can intrude your body then, Shi Yang suddenly shouted, his thunder voice echoing in Xia Xinyang's head. Xia Xinyang's soft body shivered. Her beautiful eyes weren't frightened anymore. They became clear when her face suddenly had a faint but bright halo. She believed in Shi Yang. She didn't hesitate but follow his instruction. Xia Xinyang urged the energy in her god power ancient tree, circulating around her body to push the energy remnant and the other pollutants that had intruded her. She kept her mind clear and sound to control her power. A magical feeling came out from her body as if someone was enjoying the passing time. She looked as if she was walking around the long river of time, visiting the past and foreseeing the future. It was so magical and yet unpredictable. Space and time power Upanishads were extremely mysterious. It was really hard to understand and master these two power Upanishads. However, learning time power Upanishad was much more difficult than cultivating the space power Upanishad. It was tough to catch the delicate feature of it. Even the God clan didn't have any scripture about time power Upanishad. In history, the number of warriors cultivating time power Upanishad was much smaller than that of space power Upanishad. Thus, Xia Xinyang had no teacher. If she wanted to advance further to the next realm, she had only herself to count on. Interesting. I should try it, too, Zi Yarrow watched, smiling. She put away the light cage, exposing her body. She had only the peak of ethereal god realm, still a big step away from the incipient god realm. However, when she retrieved her light cage, she looked so calm. Since she didn't experience the terrible pain Xia Xinyang had had that year, she didn't have a barrier in her mind. Thus, she could be even calmer. A strange light twinkled in her beautiful eyes. She suddenly asked, "Do you feel really comfortable too?" Xiang was stunned, asking, "What do you mean?" "It feels like soaking in a hot spring. A magical energy seeps into your body, and then you feel your bones and veins become tougher. Can you feel that?" She smiled happily. "No, nothing at all." Xiang was so surprised, looking at her as if he was watching a monster. You feel cozy without using the god power to protect your body? It feels like soaking in the hot spring? Are you sure?" Xiang knew that no creature could adapt to this area, including the warriors cultivating space power Upanishad like him. Although they could avoid many dangers in this area, they couldn't absorb any kind of energy here. Because this area had no earth and heaven energy. All it had was the deadly, murderous energy that no one could absorb. If they didn't use the light cage to protect their bodies, it would feel like the fish getting out of the water. They would never be able to adapt to this sort of harsh environment. However, Zi Yarrow looked apparently enjoy it a lot. She felt comfortable like the fish swimming in the sea. So strange. "I'm sure. It's really cozy." Zi Yarrow's white arms moved as if she was a flying butterfly gliding leisurely through the fierce storm. However, nothing seemed to affect her. Xiang's eyes had a strange light. "You can still increase your energy to cultivate here?" "I didn't mean to cultivate here. But some kind of energy has initially entered my body." "Ah!" She suddenly screamed, her beautiful face joyful. "Do you remember that I have a special power Upanishad? I got it when I was collecting outer space streamers. The outer space streamers also have life consciousness. It's somehow similar to the heaven flames. Do you remember that?" "Yes, I do," Xiang nodded. "The aura of this area and the aura of the outer space streamers I used to take are similar. I can feel some streamers with the consciousness come from this place. This place seems to be their home. It gives me a dear feeling of coming home," Zi Yarrow mumbled as if she was dreaming. Xiang listened to her quietly. He became baffled eventually. Chapter 1328, Walking Free. Chapter 1328, Walking Free. Zi Yarrow was like an agile butterfly, floating and flying around. Colorful light radiated magnificently from her body. It had 9 colors including tangerine, cyan, purple, blue, white, green, yellow, black, and gray. 9 different colored lights emitted from Zi Yarrow's body. Gradually, they became like ribbons that made her more mesmerizing. The energy fluctuating from her body condensed and accumulated as beautiful light radiated from her. It seemed like her words were true. She could still gather energy in this chaotic space basin. Moreover, she could do that at a faster speed and more productive rate than in any other environment. It was unbelievable. Suddenly, Xiang remembered what Zi Yarrow had told him about her power Upanishad. It was a special light power Upanishad that was different from the light power Upanishad that the God clan had cultivated in features and auras. Zi Yarrow's power Upanishad was learned from outer space streamers. The divine light was a very special sort of light. They came from miraculous areas somewhere in this universe. Most of them had a simple consciousness. They could move freely and enter creatures' bodies or have some spectacular changes. This kind of outer space divine light often moved through the sea of stars like shooting stars. They flashed and disappeared. Not many people could grab a good chance to see them, let alone catch it and get it into the body to create a special light power Upanishad. Zi Yarrow got the outer space divine light and merged it into her body. She had developed this power Upanishad and slowly advanced it. This was an extremely God-given talent, indeed. However, this power Upanishad was rare and not many people could cultivate it, let alone cultivate it to a profound level. Rumors said that it was very difficult to break through in this power Upanishad. It would be easier if the warrior could continuously absorb the outer space divine light. Unfortunately, the divine light in this cosmos was really rare. The other people perhaps wouldn't have even a chance to see them. Although the warriors cultivating this power Upanishad could recognize and locate the outer space divine light, it was just a dream if they wanted to find and capture a lot of them in this vast sea of stars. Today, after Zi Yarrow retrieved her protecting light cage and exposed her body in the chaotic current, she looked comfortable. Amazingly, she could even cultivate here freely. Her cultivating speed was much faster than when she cultivated on any high-level life star out there. Shi Yang, Xia Xin Yang, and most of the warriors could never be able to absorb the energy Zi Yarrow was taking in. She didn't even do anything to gather them into her frame and flesh. After a while, the 9-colored halo and ribbons were moving around her and making her a precious deity. Well, it's strange, though. I couldn't think that where Xin Yang considers the toxic land is your auspicious land, Shi Yang sighed. I couldn't believe that I can continue to cultivate in this area. It's really awesome. The energy in this place and the divine light I had collected have the same aura. I think they share the same origin. Oh. Over there, the aura is thicker. I'm going there to check. Zi Yarrow smiled tenderly. She swiftly flew away like a river of light, her speed very fast. Why don't you follow her to see? Xia Xin Yang smiled. She didn't look frightened anymore. The beautiful light rippled in her eyes. It seems like I don't need to worry about her here. In this place, seems like she won't encounter many dangers. Shi Yang rubbed his chin, looking like he was contemplating in the direction Zi Yarrow had just disappeared. She has a seal of mine on her body. In this area, my soul consciousness can locate her at ease. I can teleport to her instantly. Oh, you're so thoughtful and caring. Since when have you become so sensitive and dedicated? Xia Xin Yang teased him, her voice sour. Shi Yang was astounded. A woman's heart was like the sea, indeed. Shi Yang understood this proverb deeply now. When he was in Black Angle Star to send the energy to Blood Devil and the others, his hearing wasn't affected. He had heard all that Xia Xin Yang and Zi Yarrow had told each other. He thought that they were like close sisters. Thus, he slightly showed his care to Zi Yarrow. Unexpectedly, Xia Xin Yang immediately showed that she was jealous, though. Well, I always am. Shi Yang beamed and moved. He had crossed the distance and appeared like a ghost by her. His large hand was placed on her soft, jade-like hand. A flow of vitality was transmitted into her body and was flowing through her veins. Since he couldn't send pure energy to her body the way he had sent energy to Blood Devil or Ka2 he could only send the vitality that he had condensed to her. He could only use the power from the immortal demon blood to take care of her. Xia Xin Yang's soft body quivered when the flow of life energy moved warmly in her body. She said, "You don't need to do that. I got enough energy in my body. Also, when you were in Thunder Firmament Star area, someone suddenly gave me a condensed energy ball. It somehow relates to you." Shi Yang held her small, soft hand and frowned. "Are you sure? I can see the past." Xia Xin Yang's beautiful eyes sparkled strangely. "That piece of past happened in this space current. That man stayed here, condensed the energy, and then gave it to me. I can show you a vague scene. Come into my ethereal extent." Shi Yang was surprised. He sent a wisp of his soul to her open ethereal extent. As soon as Shi Yang got in her ethereal extent, he was stunned. Her ethereal extent was extremely spectacular. It was a place full of shattered images like thousands of screens. His soul flew freely inside her ethereal extent and he felt like he was reading her memory to know what she had experienced. She was completely relaxed. She opened her innermost place to let him examine. Suddenly, a piece of a broken image came near to him and the character inside began to move. Shi Yang saw the chaotic space current and DeCarlos, who was gathering and condensing energy taken from the ice and fire power Upanishad of Cook and Jeremy. He threw it to the space slit and it fell on Xia Xin Yang's body. Shi Yang was so amazed. He couldn't believe that Xia Xin Yang told him the truth. The energy she had received was related to him. It was he who had forced Cook and Jeremy to combine the best power to create that earth-shaking ice and fireball. Shi Yang wanted to pull it into the space slit, but DeCarlos had taken it earlier and given it to Xia Xin Yang. Shortly after, Shi Yang flew out of Xia Xin Yang's ethereal extent. That man is called DeCarlos. He's the expert with the best space power Upanishad in this universe in this age. As far as I know, he has reached second sky of immortal realm. Very excellent. But why did he send that chunk of energy to you? I can't understand him. Me neither, Xia Xinyang shook her head. DeCarlos was the expert with the most thorough understanding of space power Upanishad in this universe. He wouldn't do anything in vain. He must have had some idea when he condensed the pure energy and gifted it to Xia Xinyang. Xia Yang wore a dark face and thought. However, as he couldn't make head or tail of it, he decided to put it aside. Can you face the evil barrier in your heart now? Do you still feel like that invisible barrier exists? How could I make it that fast? I need more time to get used to this place and erase the fear, she smiled tenderly but also weakly. Her bright eyes were so mild. Before I do that, can you stand by me until I adapt to the terrifying dangers in this area? I sure can. Xia Yang looked to the area ahead of them and thought. Then, he encouraged her, in this area of turbulent space currents, all gusts, icicles, explosions, and streamers are fatal. Normal incipient God realm experts can't escape easily. Those really powerful things can even hurt immortal realm experts. You can move. You shouldn't stand still. I will watch over you. Before you encounter a deadly danger, I will warn you. All right. Xia Xinyang stooped and smiled. She moved swiftly like a shadow in Ziyao's direction. Xia Yang smiled and followed her. They flew through the endless space slit one after another. Sometimes they exchanged looks. Sometimes they chatted. Their souls felt quiet and peaceful. The bands of light exploded and sent sparks everywhere, which looked so magnificent. Sometimes, they saw snowflakes coming out of nowhere bringing cold energy with them that could even freeze and crack an entire planet. There were also fiery flames rolling up to the sky as if they wanted to burn everything down. Although she was flying inside a place with so many death traps and turbulent energy, Xia Xinyang never felt so safe and happy. It was because Xia Yang was by her side. The nightmare experience from many years ago seemed to fade after several days moving through a chaotic space basin with countless dangers. Eventually, she recognized one thing. It wasn't like in the past. She could survive even in the much harsher environment. In this area, there was no concept of time. Both Xia Yang and Xia Xinyang didn't know how long they had been here. They flew and accompanied each other. Sometimes they kissed, holding hands and enjoying the rare peaceful moments. They enjoyed the chances to be together as lovers. Until one day, Xia Yang was shocked. Their peace was broken quickly. What? Xia Xinyang frowned. The massive, deadly explosions created by moving streamers happened continuously around them beautifully. They were sitting on a strange, floating rock and talking about the events in the past. All of a sudden, Xia Yang shivered. He looked frightened. I can't sense her existence anymore. Xia Xinyang knew who he was just mentioning. Her face also changed. Why is that? Didn't you tell me that you've put a seal in her body? As long as we are here, can't you easily locate her? Did she leave this place and return to Fiery Rainstar area or Agate Star area? Impossible, she doesn't cultivate space power Upanishad. She can't find the exit. Xia Yang shook his head and frowned. His face grimaced. What kind of character that could erase the seal you've planted? Asked Xia Xinyang. The immortal realm experts. But it's not that. Because if it happened that way, my soul would feel numb. I didn't feel pain. I'm sure the seal is still there, but I can't locate her. It's so strange. Xia Yang darkened his face, his eyes sparkling. Chapter 1329, Slyland. Chapter 1329, Slyland. The chaotic space currents hid so many death traps including loud and terrifying explosions, cutting gusts, burning flames, and sharp icicles that even the immortal realm experts couldn't wiggle to get rid of them. That year, Shinro, the chief of Despair Force at the immortal realm, went here to find bloodthirsty remains. Since he couldn't gather energy in this area and continuously drained his own energy, he was exhausted and confined in this area until he was completely gone. Although he was at the immortal realm, He still had to die under the patient erosion of time. Xi Yarrow had only third sky of ethereal god realm. Although her power Upanishad was special, the connection with her was gone. If she encountered deadly dangers or any other malicious expert, no one could predict the results. It wasn't only Shi Yang who could come here. As long as they were the warriors with the successful space power Upanishad, they could visit this place as often as they pleased. Even the warriors who didn't cultivate space power Upanishad could get here if he found the entrance. When Shi Yang was in Broken Star Field, he was pulled into a space split in Agate Star area after the void there had shattered. He met Carlos, Embark, and Chrisen there. Those three didn't have bodies anymore. Because of the soul-refining fluid, they had captured Shi Yang and McGee of Evil Dragon Tribe. Without the body, the soul could move faster. However, it was a disadvantage when fighting a warrior who had a body. Shi Yang knew that many people exploded shortly after they were dragged into this area accidentally. They could only survive in their soul forms. Of course, the warriors with profound realms could resist the erosive process of the turbulent space currents. They could even endure it for several thousand years. Perhaps Shinro had survived here for several thousand years before his god power had drained, which put him to death. The beams of soul consciousness flashed in his brain. Shi Yang was calm like water. He chanted Xi Yarrow's name in his head. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The drops of ruby demon blood floated in front of his forehead and lined up into the pyramids with the pointy top and the large foundation. Shi Yang had reached second sky of incipient god realm and he had just absorbed so much energy that he had to share it with the others. Currently, his body was filled with immortal demon blood. The drops of shining blood hovered in front of him and condensed. When he triggered its energy, the demon blood turned into liquid and released surging vitality. Now, he had demon blood filling his body so he could use as much as he wanted. Thus, he used 36 drops and stacked them into a pyramid of blood. It was really a waste to use 36 drops of blood just to find someone. But at this moment, Shi Yang didn't have the extra effort to care that much. His thoughts changed while he chanted Xi Yarrow's name. The pyramid of demon blood in front of him seemed to melt and merge together, radiating the blood lights. Swoosh! Suddenly, all the demon blood drops turned into a pyramid mark and moved. It flashed and then disappeared from Shi Yang's sight. As Xi Yarrow was at peak of ethereal god realm, when Shi Yang used a lot of demon blood like that to track her life magnetic field, even if she was in some faraway star area, Shi Yang believed that he could still pierce through innumerable barriers to locate her. Xia Xin Yang stayed quiet. She didn't disturb him. Her bright eyes curiously assessed his work. When she saw the blood pyramid form and fly away, she looked amazed and touched. At that moment, the energy surging from Shi Yang could be compared to energy from an expert at peak of incipient god realm. Xia Xin Yang thought he was even a little more powerful than that. She was so touched. Eventually, she recognized that the young man who hadn't been able to surpass her in the past was thriving and reaching heights that she couldn't catch up to. It's so strange. I used 36 drops of immortal demon blood to find her. Even if she's several star areas away, I should have located her already. Why did I get nothing? Strange. Really strange. Shi Yang mumbled skeptically. Then, he didn't wait for Xia Xin Yang to talk and reached for her delicate waist. Their shadows flashed and moved. Swoosh, swoosh. Xia Xin Yang immediately felt the gusts around become more terrifying. The strange scenes changed continuously as they moved like a shuttle between the space slits. This speed was something over her imagination. I can't identify her exact location. I can only tell the general direction. I think she didn't encounter a strong enemy. She's in some place magical that can stop my sensitivity. Shi Yang lowered his voice, his soul altar spinning gently and releasing space energy. The chaotic space basin was immensely vast without borders. No one had ever discovered it to the very end. This place had only endless isolation and dangers. If they were careless, the warriors could have both their bodies and souls perish in this strange piece of the void. Only the warriors like Shi Yang, the ones with the space power Upanishad at profound realms, could go around here freely. Just like a beam of light piercing through the river from the past to the present, Shi Yang held Xia Xinyang and moved forward in the middle of the deadly destructive energy waves. He became more grave. He didn't expect Zi Yarrow to be so far from him like that because he had just traveled through a distance equal to the length between the far west point to the far east point of Agate Star area. In a short period like this, Zi Yarrow, who didn't have the space power Upanishad and was at only peak of ethereal god realm, couldn't cross such a distance. It was unbelievable to Shi Yang. Shi Yang halted. "It's strange here." Xia Xinyang screamed and moved around. She looked astounded. "Yeah, really strange." Shi Yang furrowed his brows deeply. This area was the upper limit of his sensitivity. Through the demon blood, he had reached this area where so many dark clouds were hovering. Those dark cotton clouds looked as if they had already stuffed this space. The murky raindrops chained together and connected both ends of the void. Not far from them, the lightning and thunder were dancing like massive, howling beasts. The rolls of gusts swarmed over with momentum that could blow even the soul altar out of the body. Further ahead, explosions boomed continuously. After each time, the void had a new hole that looked like a new entrance to this chaotic space basin. Even Xia Xinyang, who didn't cultivate space power Upanishad, could see the strange situations here. "Hey!" Shi Yang discolored slightly. He immediately turned to look in a direction where there was a jet-black cluster of a cloud. A faint shadow had just flashed. Just like a beam of starlight, Shi Yang reached the cloud in just a blink of an eye. As soon as he got near, he felt chilled. His frame and veins made crack sounds as they were frozen. It was just a cloud, but the cold energy it bore was so powerful. Shi Yang had to use the heaven flames of the origin. The burning heaven flame moved 9 rounds around his body to neutralize the cold energy. He focused on that cloud. His face grimaced. The cloud was like a viscous substance that covered someone. The victim of the cloud looked grey and it gave people a thick sense of death. Shi Yang knew this man. He was Spark. He was Elder Spark of the God Clan's Elder Committee, an expert at the false immortal realm. Shi Yang had damaged his celestial ice jade flake, so he had to jump into the space current to find his life treasure. However, with his cultivation base, even if his soul was hurt, Spark shouldn't be in this dangerous situation. Inside the viscous cloud, Spark seemed to have lost his consciousness. His grey eyes weren't lively. His face didn't have normal emotions of an alive human. He looked faint and numb. Looking at him, Shi Yang thought that he was watching a puppet without a soul. He suddenly felt so chilled that his hair rose. "It's so peculiar here." He found Spark here because of his weak life energy fluctuations. Shi Yang understood it, so he came to check. His thoughts changed. He turned into a dim shadow and dashed toward the nearest cloud. Carefully keeping a safe distance, he observed it from above. Shi Yang winced. He found another person stuck inside the nearest cloud. It was a stranger he didn't know. That man was stuck inside the cloud like Spark, but he didn't have a bit of life in him anymore. He looked like a statue that Shi Yang didn't know how long he had been petrified there. He continuously checked the other clusters of clouds. After a while, he returned to Spark. There were more than dozens of thousands of clouds here, and many of them had captured a warrior inside. Shi Yang found some empty clusters too. They looked like demons with open mouths, waiting for the right moment. He felt his hair on his nape rising. He felt so chilled, indeed. "Do you know him?" Xia Xinyang quietly came and carefully avoided the clusters of dark clouds. She stood by Shiwaye and asked. "His name is Spark, an experienced elder of the God Clan's Elder Committee at the False Immortal Realm. He was based in Fiery Rainstar area. He had troubled Yunnan and Blood Devil a lot." Shi Yang took a deep breath. Many clusters of clouds around here have captured a warrior inside. Most of them are dead. Only this man still has a wisp of life in him. Xia Xinyang discolored in fear. Suddenly, Spark wiggled. His eyes became clear. Looking at Shi Yang, he shouted, "Kill me, hurry, kill me." Xia Xinyang was frightened. She hurried to back off. Spark had scared her. Shi Yang looked stern and focused on Spark. "Why are you like this? What happened? Have you seen a girl in a purple dress around? Tell me now. Kill me. Leave this place at once." It's my advice to you. Kill me, please. Spark screamed as if he had lost his mind. While he was still crying, the intestines in his abdomen moved and tore his skin, reaching out like a rod and attempting to capture Shiyang. Uraga! Spark screeched mournfully. The lucid gleam in his eyes disappeared. He became a dead puppet again. It looked like his soul was occupied. Chapter 1330, The Anonymous Evil Thing. Chapter 1330, The Anonymous Evil Thing. Something alerted Shiyang immediately. He hugged Xinyang and left the area, his face as cold as ice. Sizzle. Sizzle. Spark's veins and intestines were like smart and agile snakes, aiming at Shiyang to coil him. At the same time, a cold and evil aura came together with those snake-like intestines and blood veins. Unexpectedly, it seeped into Shiyang's sea of consciousness and slowed down his soul altar. That cold and evil aura was like the soul consciousness of a terrifying soul that was able to affect and confine the warrior's soul. Boom! A strong blow suddenly hit his chest. Shiyang couldn't believe it and he looked at Xinyang. Xinyang wore a numb face. She seemed to have gotten possessed. She was now a puppet that didn't have control over her body. Her cold eyes didn't sparkle with human emotions anymore. They were cold and sharp like ice. She had just attacked Shiyang at his chest and gotten rid of his embrace. After she got loose from him, she didn't attack Shiyang more. She indifferently moved towards a hovering cloud not far from her. That cloud was empty and it opened like an evil mouth waiting for food to come. Not good. Shiyang's eyes became rough. He didn't need to think to know that Xinyang was controlled by that evil force. Her soul was confined now. Sizzle. 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 The veins and intestines from Spark's body became like evil snakes or demons' tongues. They were swift and agile with auras that could enchant the soul. They came like lightning. Swoosh. 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 Shortly after, the burning flames flew out from Shiyang's body and turned into a seething fire sea. The aura of the heaven flames was released and it filled the area. The veins and intestines sizzled inside the heaven flames. They immediately retreated into Spark's chest. The last bit of life on Spark's face disappeared. He was now filled with a dead aura. With heaven flames moving around, Shiyang became a burning man and he shot out. He flashed and then appeared by Xinyang, extending his hand to catch her. Blurp. 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 All of a sudden, strange noises arose from the clouds around him. Those noises sounded like some liquid boiling, a gushing stream, or something gulping. Swish. Swish. The beams of some mucus, grey substance like saliva drooling from the stinky mouth of some beast suddenly shot out from the dark clouds. All of them had the same target. Shiyang. Shiyang sneered. His god power burst out and made the sea of fire on his body fierier. A dark red fire came with Shiyang's soul consciousness detached from the sea of fire and moved quickly towards Xinyang. Xinyang had a numb face before she was shrouded inside the flame. When the scorching flame covered her, its aura switched from burning to freezing. This switching was smooth and magical, indeed. A cold current directly seeped into her brain and released an extremely cold but clear aura that cleaned her soul altar. Her beautiful eyes resumed lucid. Her face changed when she pressed her two thumbs on her eyes. A strange ability of time was urged. The miraculous replay appeared. It seemed like she had recovered her condition to the time before she was possessed by the evil energy. In her eyes, after her time had flown backward, the unknown aura that had invaded her had disappeared. The time power Upanishad was so magical and inexplicable. A warrior who cultivated it to a profound level could stay in his prime condition forever by locking his time. After Xinyang recovered, her eyes became so cold. She looked at the clusters of dark clouds around and whispered, "Be careful. Something evil is here." Right at this moment, more sticky fluid fell into the sea of fire that Shiyang had created. Strangely, those beams of thick fluid weren't burned or evaporated. They could survive in his sea of fire made of the heaven flames. Although they smoked, they still persistently went towards his body. Shiyang was a little shocked. Since he was blended into this world, He hadn't seen many things that could survive heaven flames. He couldn't believe that this sort of anonymous, sticky substance was so frightening. Extinguish. He placed one finger on the glabella. The soul altar released the dazzling heaven flame again, but fiercer this time. After another fusion, Shi Yang now had 4 types of heaven flames to use. He had just released one of them. A new flow of heaven flame came with fine electric beams and lightning bolts, and even the aura that could erode the soul. It was the combined flame of the world-extinguishing thunder flame, the 9 serenity soul-devouring flame, and the ice-cold flame. This heaven flame had dancing lightning and a soul-devouring aura that boosted its power to the acme. The mucus substance couldn't resist it. However, it wasn't melted down. All beams of this evil, sticky thing immediately got rid of the sea of fire and returned to the dark clouds. It's possible that one of those clouds has captured Zi Yarrow. Xia Xin Yang dashed forward and stood by Shi Yang. Her face was cold and her eyes were worried. At the false immortal realm, Spark was trapped inside the dark cloud. If Zi Yarrow was confined, it was hard to say if she could endure until now. I'm going to send more fire. Pondering, Shi Yang released the combined flame of the immemorial demonic flame, the yin spirit ghost flame, and the corpse vanishing flame. He had boosted the power of the flame around him to be several times higher. With Shi Yang as the center, the sea of fire expanded rapidly. The top young, hot flame turned into flows that covered the dark clouds around and attempted to burn them into ashes. I don't care who or what you are. I just want you to give me the girl wearing purple clothes. As long as she's all right, I won't burn you down. I will leave you in peace here. Shi Yang closed his eyes and mouth, releasing his soul consciousness like the storm in the sea of fire. He sent wisps of soul consciousness in every direction. Shi Yang believed that as long as it was some high-level creature with a soul, it could receive his wisp of soul consciousness and understand him. This time, Zi Yarrow was missing and it was a big possibility that those jet black clouds had captured her. Shi Yang didn't know if Zi Yarrow was still alive. If he risked everything to defeat the enemy, there was a chance that Zi Yarrow wouldn't survive even if he won. Thus, the first thing he had to do was to ensure that Zi Yarrow could survive. That's why he decided to use the soul to communicate. Unfortunately, his soul message couldn't achieve the desired effect. In fact, there was no response. Those clusters of clouds were like dead things or objects that didn't have a consciousness. They were there, still. Shi Yang didn't receive a reply. Shi Yang wore a dark and cold face. He lowered his voice, then don't blame me for destroying this place entirely. Boom, boom, boom. Just like a bursting flood, heaven flames rumbled inside the sea of fire. The fire flew out and hit the clouds and the warriors covered inside precisely like the meteorites. Apparently, those warriors were dead. There was no bit of vitality in their bodies. However, Shi Yang had a feeling that they still had a flow of consciousness that was scattered like the wisps of the Thunder Dragon's soul in the star area barrier. However, the difference here was that Lei Di's scattered soul didn't have consciousness. It had only memories and a pure aura. After all the wisps were reunited, Lei Di was revived and had regained his consciousness and cognition. However, the flow of consciousness in those warriors' bodies seemed to be able to survive individually. It was like Ming Hao's soul control power Upanishad that could make each wisp of his soul a clone of his. That's how they had many Ming Haos in different star areas. The consciousness that Shi Yang could feel in those clouds was similar to Ming Hao's condition. Explode them, Shi Yang shouted. The scorching flames swarmed over and attacked a big cloud. The impact was so earth-shaking. Just like the constant explosions not far from them, the explosion from this impact had created holes in the void like an entrance leading to other areas. However, the explosion and the heat from the heaven flames couldn't burn and extinguish the ink-like clouds. They weren't affected. They just shrank a little bit. The strange rain still fell and connected the sky and the underworld. However, at this moment, it suddenly became fiercer. The sprinkle had become a downpour. In this area of chaotic space currents, this kind of rain shouldn't happen. However, it occurred now. The raindrops were like a demon's tears with an extremely strong piercing power. They came like falling daggers. Shi Yang's face changed again. The evil and peculiar features of this area were over his imagination. He pondered for a few seconds. Billions of starlight beams radiated from his body. They turned into a light curtain or like a feather fan above Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang. The shield created by the starlight had stopped the strange rain. However, it smoked as the star energy drained quickly. If we continue this way, you can't endure for a long time without energy supplement. You're just merely using energy without a refill, said Xia Xinyang. Shi Yang nodded. He knew she was right. Because they couldn't refill the consumed energy in this hour, their day of death was when their energy was all gone. Shi Yang couldn't absorb the energy in this area. He had thought that no creature could take in the remnant of energy inside the chaotic space basin. But when he found Zi Yarrow could do that, he understood that nothing was absolute. Shi Yang believed that the one who was attacking them discreetly, the creature they didn't know yet, could gather the energy here for sure. If he fought that person here, he would lose eventually in a battle of attrition. We will have some solution, Shi Yang comforted her calmly. He quieted down his mind and released his soul consciousness to sense and survey. He wanted to use the soul consciousness to check if he could find Zi Yarrow in the clouds around here. After that, he would think about how to rescue her. After a while, he screamed, his face panic-stricken. He suddenly looked in a direction where two powerful experts were approaching. He knew both of them. DeCarlos and Lady. Why did they come here? What did they come here for? Chapter 1331, The Big Meatball. Chapter 1331, The Big Meatball. The starlight curtain above their heads could resist the fierce downpour. Shi Yang put on a heaven countenance. He was surprised too. Xia Xinyang was sensitive enough to see the slightest change on his face and the scream. Did you find something? Someone is coming. Shi Yang had an idea. He released his soul consciousness and revealed his life energy fluctuation. He wanted to know if DeCarlos and Lady came here on purpose. A wisp of soul consciousness flew out and flashed in the middle of the outer space streamers. He focused on observing. Indeed, they were heading here. Surprisingly, DeCarlos and Lady came to this area together. When Shi Yang had released his soul consciousness, DeCarlos and Lady looked surprised. They exchanged looks and frowned. Then, they turned into two beams of lightning and crossed the distance immediately. In the next moment, Lady and DeCarlos had arrived by Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang. When the 2-second sky of Immortal Realm experts saw Shi Yang, they had awkward expressions. Why are you here? DeCarlos asked as he couldn't make head or tail out of it. Shi Yang had the same doubt. So why are you here? You're the one who gifted me that pure energy at the same time, Xia Xinyang cried. Her beautiful eyes had a magical light. She looked at DeCarlos and cried. We don't know each other. Why did you pour that amount of pure energy on me? Because you're cultivating time power Upanishad. In this vast sea of stars, you're not the only expert cultivating this power, but you have the highest realm. DeCarlos looked at her, his voice tender and happy. It seems like the evil barrier in your heart is clear. Yeah, it's really good. Now, you can continue to break through and progress faster. I quite don't understand your idea. For the time being, you don't need to understand it. Your realm is still a little low. When the time comes and your realm becomes sufficient, I will tell you the reason. Why are you here? DeCarlos suddenly furrowed his brows and quieted down. Taking a deep breath, he looked at the clouds around and then Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang. He asked, how did you get here? Coincidence. Shi Yang rubbed his forehead. Pondering for a while, he thought he should tell them the truth. Perhaps they could provide him with more precise information. Thus, he told them the situation. A friend of mine came here unintentionally. I guess those clouds have captured her. I came here following her life energy fluctuations. Those aren't clouds, said Lady all of a sudden. DeCarlos looked at him. Are they related to the ones of your heavenly monster tribe? Lady shook his head. Hesitating for a while, he turned to Shi Yang. You should ask him. I think he knows it better than I do. DeCarlos' eyes brightened. He didn't pretend to go around the bush. Kid, do you feel anything familiar here? Did you sense the distinctive aura of the very first generation of heavenly monster tribe around here? Shi Yang observed the surroundings, including innumerable clouds and the strange downpour. He pried, "You mean there is some creature living around here?" Lady and DeCarlos nodded. "No, there's no aura of heavenly monster tribes precursors. Otherwise, I would have sensed it before. When I was in Thunder Firmament Star area and saw the thunder wisps of a soul for the first time, I could feel the magical aura instantly. I didn't have such a feeling here," Shi Yang said. Listening to him, Lady and DeCarlos went stern. After a while, DeCarlos said in a low-pitched voice, "We were wrong. It's not one of heavenly monster tribes precursors. So, what is it? Isn't it a creature from our universe? What are you guys talking about?" Shi Yang sounded bewildered. DeCarlos looked at him and hesitated. "That thing always exists in this space basin. It has swallowed countless warriors who had fallen into this area accidentally. It's really bizarre. Its body seems to detach or divide into many pieces and scatter throughout the many death traps in this area. I've been living for so many years in the turbulent space basin. I've encountered its existence in many zones. It has a life consciousness. It can gather energy here. It can move, but it has never contacted any other creature." Talking about this strange creature, DeCarlos looked baffled and worried somehow. "If these aren't clouds, are they its body?" asked Xin Yang. It was unknown why DeCarlos didn't treat Shi Yang with care. He sounded a little harsh, though. However, when he talked to Xin Yang, he was very gentle. He even paid attention to Xin Yang's question. "The clouds are just the cover. Let me show you its real form. Take a look." DeCarlos made the hand seal. His 10 fingertips joined and sharp blades shot out, attacking one dark cloud. The sharp blades were like pairs of scissors that peeled the dark cloud as if someone was peeling off a tangerine. The cloud was paired, releasing wisps of smoke. All of a sudden, an ugly thing emerged nakedly. That thing was a grey-brown chunk with many small dots like snot from a runny nose or some soft maggots. Somehow, it looked more like sarcomas or meat lumps. This gross thing could even move. After a glance, Xin Yang was filled with loathing. So disgusting. This area has more than dozens of thousands of clouds. Each cloud has a thing like that keeps the warriors inside. They are the ones who have come here accidentally. Those things have captured them and killed them slowly. Those clouds are ugly meatballs or malicious tumors. Sometimes, they gather, but most of the time, they stay separate like this. I want to tell you one more thing. There are many areas with the same clusters of clouds like this in the chaotic space currents. I've seen a lot. However, with my cultivation base, I can't survey the ends of the current. I guess there will be more of these in the deeper and further area, DeCarlos explained. Shi Yang and Xin Yang were frightened. They were baffled and they couldn't say anything. This infinite chaotic space basin had many areas with this sort of creature that was like malignant tumors. No one knew how long they had been there and how many warriors of many eras they had swallowed. DeCarlos didn't know if it had a high intellect or not. It was because he had never talked to it. However, DeCarlos had a vague feeling that it did have intelligence and a complete consciousness. Thus, he thought the reason why it didn't want to communicate with him was that it disdained him. I have an absurd feeling. I feel like it disdains to talk to us because it assumes that we don't deserve it. It's like we don't talk to a bug because we're a high-level creature and a bug is just a lowly insect. There's a distance we can't cover, added DeCarlos. Absurd. Really absurd. I'm sure you're wrong. Even Lady couldn't stand it. He shook his head continuously, doubting DeCarlos's feeling. Except for you, who knows about its existence? Asked Shi Yang. DeCarlos snorted. I don't know. As far as I know, no one else knows about it and is still alive. Xian He, Frederick, and Tian Xie have profound realms, but their territories are somewhere else. They are restricted a lot in this space basin. They can't stay here for a long time. So why are you here? What's your purpose? Shi Yang asked again. He thinks it's a hidden danger. We can't talk to it, so we decided to destroy it. We will destroy each of the gathering spots he's found. We don't want to leave any seed of potential dangers. Different from his friend, Lei Di explained to Shi Yang calmly and gently. Shi Yang had revived him, and Shi Yang had the origin of his homeland. From deep in his soul, he felt close to Shi Yang instinctively. It was the soul streak that existed in his soul since he was born. He could never erase it. Destroy it here? Shi Yang grinned. Good thought. I have the same idea. It seems like we have the same voice here. You've tried, De Carlos frowned, his face severe. Although your realm's not high, you have the origin of the ancient continent. You have the heaven flames. I heard that heaven flames can refine any kind of creature. You've tried, but you didn't succeed. Lei Di's face darkened. Is it really hard to destroy this thing? Perhaps it's because I haven't fused with my heaven flame utterly. But it's really peculiar, indeed, nodded Shi Yang. De Carlos wore a stern face, his line of sight raking around. After a while, he talked to Shi Yang. Today, your bloodthirsty force and the God clan are in furious war. You ignore your business and come here for what? Lei Di and I will solve the problem here. You should leave soon. Don't waste Xian He and Ming Hao's appreciation for you. A friend of mine has gone missing, Shi Yang snorted. Ah, because of a girl, haha. Kid, you have my style from before. Lei Di laughed and grumblingly shook the entire void. He cocked his head, looking at Xia Xinyang and grinning. You got two beautiful ladies at the same time. Bold. Both Lei Di and Azure Dragon had the lustful blood of the Dragon clan. Rumors said that the two ancestors of heavenly monster tribe Lei Di and Qing Xiao had turned their backs to each other because of women. Moreover, Elder Spark of the God clan just died. Fiery Rain Star area won the first victory. Of course, Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick have managed all the details of the bigger battles. I don't need to worry a lot, said Shi Yang indifferently. He knew his capacity. Before he had reached the immortal realm to be finally equal to Quan He and Ming Hao, the newly elected master of the bloodthirsty force was just a puppet. He could step on this throne because Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick thought that it would be easier and more legal for him to have the voice as the master. Unless Xian He, Ming Hao, and Frederick didn't mind bloodthirst's rules, they couldn't call all the warriors cultivating the 8 power Upanishads to launch the war against the God clan. If you insist on staying, I will tell you more things. It's true that you can help us a little more. De Carlos pondered for a while and then nodded. Shi Yang's eyes brightened. Chapter 1332, Refine. Chapter 1332, Refine. Actually, I've paid attention to it for a long time. I've secretly watched its moves. However, it recently became rebellious. As it captured more warriors, perhaps it's like a wounded warrior getting healed. De Carlos explained with a grave face. Recently, the space passages in the sea territory of many star areas often encounter problems. Many warriors have gone missing inexplicably while moving through the space passages. Furthermore, many people who were using the space teleport formation I've built have also gone missing. He looked at Xia Xinyang and Shi Yang, his face heavier. I didn't have a clue until I found a missing warrior in a cloud near here. De Carlos pointed at the dark clouds around and spoke with a cold countenance. Those gone missing warriors were dragged here to this chaotic space basin. It has confined them. Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang were shaken. They couldn't believe it and they felt so cold inwardly. If that thing could affect space passages and pull traveling warriors to the space basin, the transport between the star areas was going to be much more dangerous later on. De Carlos was the warrior with the best space power Upanishad in the world. He had built many space teleport formations for Tsunami Chamber of Commerce. When those formations were ineffective and many warriors had disappeared mysteriously while using the formations, it was going to create a terrible influence on his reputation. He had to make it clear. If it happened that way, people would be afraid of traveling through space passages. It would affect the universe a lot. It's not that simple. De Carlos rubbed his long, white beard. He looked at the dark clouds hovering nearby and said with a little fear, "It seems to affect the barrier of the sky too. You know that the normal warriors can't shatter the void with their attacks. But now, when third sky of incipient God realm experts fight, they can make the void shatter or break. They can possibly make the entire star area collapse." Shi Yang was surprised. He suddenly remembered the time he fought with Spark when his blood sword had hit the other's celestial ice jade flake, which had created a space that shattered. At that time, he suddenly had a feeling that the void seemed so vulnerable. It was too fragile. When the void collapsed that time, around 10,000 God Clan's warriors had been dragged into the space basin. He knew that they couldn't survive. Connecting this to what DeCarlos had just told him, Shi Yang grimaced. He got a very bad premonition. Could it be that someone had done something discreetly to take that horde of God clansmen to confine them like Spark? "I took Lei Di here because I found that the sea territory has become even stranger. Recently, it seems to have much more energy," continued DeCarlos. Shi Yang rubbed his nose, feeling embarrassed. "When I fought Spark, we had exploded the void of Fiery Rainstar area. Around 10,000 warriors of the God Clan had been dragged into this area. I wonder if that sudden boost of energy is related to the God Clan's warriors and Spark?" Hearing him, Lei Di was bewildered. DeCarlos changed his face and thundered, "I couldn't believe it was because of you. Don't be feverish. Don't. I'm here to find the solution, aren't I?" Shi Yang smiled sheepishly. "DeCarlos, don't forget why we're here. It's more important to do the main business." Lei Di comforted him. "This kid is our heavenly monster tribe's lucky star. If you kill him, our tribe won't thrive again." "Harumph, I don't dare to kill him, anyway." DeCarlos's face was glum as if his parents had just passed away. "He's a bad omen and a malignant tumor of this sea of stars. If he dies, this universe will be in peace. But now, no one wants to live in peace in this universe. I don't want to cause any grudge against Tian Xie, Ming Hao, or Xian He." Focus. Lei Di stressed it again. DeCarlos calmed down eventually. "Right, focus on the business. I will peel off the dark things outside the meatball. You will use rough lightning to strike it, then, we let the kid use the heaven flame to burn it down. Let's see if we can destroy it." He soon had a plan. "I think it's not gonna be trouble." Lei Di laughed roughly and winked at Shi Yang. "Do you have any problem?" "Not at all," Shi Yang shrugged. DeCarlos didn't linger. He took action directly and released his power. In this strange area, he made hand seals and skillfully drew the power of space. His body glowed and flashed continuously like a sparkling crystal. It happened like that for several seconds. Abruptly, billions of sharp blades bloomed like a storm. They scattered and slashed on those black clouds. Just like miracle sabers, they flew around and peeled off the outer layer of the black clouds. The disgusting meat lumps were revealed like massive tumors hanging in the sky and filling the area. There were more than 10,000 of them. Vaguely, they had formed a strange, unknown array. Those meatballs had a viscous substance like the nasal mucus. They swelled and moved closer to each other. Just like cells that were magnified billions of times, they gathered and made goosebumps rise on their skin. Rumble. 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 Suddenly, lightning strikes came with the bellowing thunder. Billions of lightning snakes flew out of Lei Di's incipient extent and attacked those massive balls. Sizzle. 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 Innumerable meatballs began to fume grey smoke. They swelled and diffused more sticky fluid. There were so many warriors confined inside the meatballs. The blood veins and intestines acted like the tentacles that moved agilely toward Shi Yang's team. Those things were sticky and disgusting with a sort of gross, yellow pus that was dripping. It was so nauseating, indeed. At the same time, an evil thought aimed at them. "Lei Di, could you feel that?" DeCarlos suddenly screamed, "Is that the consciousness a low-level creature could have?" Lei Di winced. He knitted his brows to focus on sensing. Then, he said, "You're right. It looks down on us and doesn't talk to us because it assumes that it's a high-level being and we're just little ants." "Yeah, that feeling. As Shi Yang and Xia Xinyang had relatively low realms, they couldn't feel the subtle features that Lei Di and Dekalos could feel. They looked surprised as they were trying to sense too. "Send out your heaven flame. Use the best power to burn down this area," shouted Dekalos. He hadn't finished, and the eternal fires hovering around Shi Yang had already expanded like fire burning the dry moor. With one breath, the scorching flames of the origin had rolled fierily. Billions of flames shot toward the meatballs like lightning strikes. Boom! Boom! The meat lumps caught on fire and started burning. At first, Dekalos had peeled off the thickest defense of it. Then, Lei Di used his magnificent lightning to bombard it, and in the end, the heaven flames of the origin burned it. The three experts had joined hands, and they seemed to find the right way to destroy those gross things. Innumerable meat lumps were covered in heaven flame, burning fiercely. "It seems that it's not really hard," Lei Di grinned and continued harshly. "We don't need to care what the heck it is. Just burn it down. Let's see what it can do." Dekalos agreed with him. Because of the fiery power of Shi Yang's heaven flames that could burn all kinds of creatures, he began to treat Shi Yang better. Looking at the vehement flame expanding, he said, "Here's just one spot. Only the spots I know, there are around 10. We should keep going. I want to find my friend," frowned Shi Yang. "The one you're searching for shouldn't be here. Otherwise, you won't burn them that easily. Before we came here, you must have investigated the area." Dekalos looked impatient. "First, for the safety of many star areas, we should head on to the main business. Perhaps the one who you're looking for is confined by the same thing but in another area. We should just check one by one then. It won't take much time anyway." "Hey! What's that?" screamed Lei Di. Dekalos and Shi Yang looked at that area. It was the meatball that kept spark. It was burned, but it didn't look like ashes. Quite the contrary, a cold energy was emitting from it. The cold energy created a blue mist, then diffused. Shi Yang's heaven flame was extinguished everywhere it went by. "It's Spark's life treasure. It's strange." He said that it was called Celestial Ice Jade Flake. He got it from the sea domain of Nihility, and he had to use 700 years to tame it. "It's really powerful, though," Shi Yang screamed as he saw the icy halo inside the meat lump. "Something from the sea domain of Nihility." Dekalos looked tense. "It can endure your heaven flame without reducing the cold energy, and it can use the mist to extinguish your premature heaven flame. This item is absolutely a magical treasure." Lei Di's eyes brightened. However, his interest was gone almost instantly, shaking his head. "Nah, it's not suitable for my power Upanishad." Zi Yao. Right at this moment, Xia Xinyang couldn't help but scream and point at something. Inside the sea of surging fire, a massive meatball was like a brain cracking. Zi Yao emerged. Her eyes were blank without a gleam of emotion. She rose one hand and grabbed the void. The celestial ice jade flake turned into a cold light and fell into her white hand. A tremendous energy fluctuated from her body. Unexpectedly, it wasn't weaker than Dekalos and Lei Di. When Zi Yao had many bright-colored halos ripple behind her, they expanded like light consonances. Her entire body immersed in the bright, divine light, and gave people a fantasy, dreamy feeling. However, the aura on her body made people quiver in fear. It was a coldness that no human being should have. Chapter 1333, Gigantic Worm. Chapter 1333, Gigantic Worm. The way Zi Yao appeared was so bizarre. She emerged from inside a torn chunk of meat, divine light twirling around her. A set of grey armor covered her beautiful body that looked like shells of some strange insect. The armor had many cracks like patterns with a mysterious energy. Layers of bright-colored halos beautified her, but her face was so cold. She grabbed something in the void and retrieved the celestial ice jade flake. Right after that, a cold energy expanded unceasingly in this area. The heaven flames Shi Yang's released were extinguished as soon as that kind of cold energy reached them. The deep-to-bone coldness was like ice water pouring into people's sea of consciousness. Shi Yang shuddered. His face changed when he shouted her name. Zi Yao. He focused on Zi Yao. A beam of light that was a wisp of his soul shot out of his eyes. Shi Yang wasn't dull. At first glance, he knew that Zi Yao was possessed, and of course, the thing that had occupied her soul altar and sea of consciousness was that unknown, evil thing. He used the soul attack to wake up Zi Yao's soul. His wisp of soul didn't meet any obstacle. It got into Zi Yao's brain easily and magically. Abruptly, the chilly feeling of entering a glacier shot back into Shi Yang's soul. He couldn't help but shiver. Checking his condition, he was scared in seeing his soul atlas frosting. Zi Yao's finger like the scallion flickered. The celestial ice jade flake shot out a cold, yin energy that seemed to have activated some magical formation. When that cold energy emerged, strange PTFFF sounds echoed from countless massive meat lumps around. People then saw the swaying meatballs act faster. They began to devour each other. After a short course of dozens of seconds, a gigantic creature was built in front of Shi Yang's group. That thing was some sort of a worm that they had never seen before. Its entire body was white-gray with countless, disgusting lumps like toad skin. As it had just been formed, the worm didn't have eyes yet. However, its shape was as massive as a life star, and it was dozens of times larger than Lei Di's monster form. After the nauseating, spectacular worm congregated, a chain of muffled murmuring came from inside its body. It was strange, as if it was communication between different souls. It was so evil and bizarre. Zi Yao was standing on that massive worm. She looked just as big as a speck of dust compared to the worm. The celestial ice jade flake on her hand sparkled and released cold energy, trying to freeze the entire place. During this process, DeCarlos and Lei Di didn't move. Their eyes were bright as they observed the alien. They looked astounded, indeed. Xia Xinyang's exquisite face had a gleam of fear. She looked at Zi Yao. Similar to what Shi Yang did, she released her soul consciousness to communicate. The wisps of cold aura like icy fibers attacked her graceful body. Immediately, she had a layer of twinkling frost on her body. She was frightened. Blood trickled down the corners of her mouth. As soon as it emerged, her blood was frozen. It looked bizarre on her face, indeed. Swoosh. A tangerine flame came on time and ran one lap around her body. The cold aura on her body was washed away. "Are you all right?" Shi Yang appeared by her. Holding her hand, he released a current of warm energy to her body. "She's possessed." Xia Xinyang slightly shook her head. The blood ice on her pink lips melted. She used a white handkerchief to wipe it. She sounded worried. "We have never seen this thing before. You should be careful. You must retain a bit of energy just in case." "Those two. They're not from our side." Shi Yang nodded. "We're correct. That thing has life and intelligence. It's a high-level living being. It's proven as it could possess that little girl's soul." It's a big surprise to see such a massive worm in this vast, mysterious universe. Apparently, DeCarlos didn't consider Zi Yao's situation. He looked at the peculiar worm and gave compliments. His white hair moved without the wind. The space energy rippled through his body. It looked like he had urged the ultimate space power Upanishad instantly. Lei Di didn't answer. Thunder rumbled in his body and shook the entire place as if it wanted to shatter this void here. Lei Di didn't hesitate and turned into his real monster body in the earth-shattering thunder. A brutal silver dragon emerged in the sky filled with lightning beams. His aura of the primal, immemorial beast swarmed over. Anyway, although his thunder dragon body wasn't small, it was still comparably tiny. It was like a man standing by a massive mountain. "DeCarlos, that thing is really frightening. My instinct tells me that I hate it and I feel insecure." Lei Di's serious voice thundered from the dragon's mouth. Altogether, the lightning balls as big as a windmill flew out from his mouth. The crystal lightning balls gathered the dazzling electric strikes and dashed toward that freaky worm. He had used his best powers. DeCarlos discolored. He was also shaken. He rarely saw Lei Di in that grave countenance. Lei Di was showing that he was facing the strongest enemy. He knew that Lei Di, the ancestor of Heavenly Monster Tribe, could somehow know the level of the alien enemy. It was his instinct. From Lei Di's performance, he apparently considered that worm his most powerful enemy. He was trying his best. DeCarlos could feel something wrong. He contemplated for a few seconds and then said, "My advice to you guys. You should leave now. Otherwise, at the critical moment, I'm afraid that we can't take care of you. I'm connected to Grace Mainland. With only a thought, I can use the space door to escape. You don't need to worry about me," said Shi Yang. DeCarlos frowned and looked at Xia Xinyang. He sighed inwardly but said nothing. His body suddenly quivered and sent his massive spatial energy towards the gigantic worm. Roar! Roar! Lei Di roared and spurted countless spinning lightning balls. Each lightning ball was enough to destroy the mountains, rivers, and even the sea. It carried the power of the expert at second sky of Immortal Realm. Several thousand lightning balls came out unceasingly from Lei Di's mouth and bombarded that bizarre worm. The earth-shaking lightning balls created big holes with sticky pus. However, those massive holes just twitched and closed. They were healed almost instantly. Its self-recovery ability was so terrifying. After the meatballs congregated, they had become much more terrifying. When Lei Di began to attack the worm, Zi Yarrow suddenly got into the meatball and disappeared. The aura on that giant worm increased further. People felt even colder. Shi Yang was chilled. He lowered his voice. "Remember, don't come near that worm." Shi Yang had an inexplicable, unknown feeling. He thought that the worm didn't move and just let Lei Di and DeCarlos attack it because it hadn't finished the fusion yet. It was adjusting its structure. It was like a sleeping person whose body went numb and needed time to get a grip when he or she got up. Shi Yang had this feeling. Shi Yang was extremely insecure. Together with that, he caught a feint of something familiar. It seemed like he knew what this worm was. This feeling didn't come from his host soul, but the co-soul in Grace Mainland. His co-soul was Grace Mainland, the life and consciousness of the planet that which had experienced countless years. No one knew how long it had existed, but surely, it had been there much longer than the four great creatures. Sizzle. 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 All of a sudden, the disasters in this area were revived. They all swarmed over. Explosions occurred everywhere. The deadly storm came with icy, twisting energy and even the drops with tremendous piercing power. The terrifying dangers came and were aimed at DeCarlos and Lei Di. The streamers everywhere towered the entire space and swarmed over them like a shower of meteors. The eccentric worm wiggled its massive body. It seemed to finally wake up after a long slumber. When it moved, the meat lumps on its body fumed the black smoke that then gathered like a terrifying evil soul. That dark soul was so cold, wiggling and snatching over Lei Di. Lei Di roared and thundered, continuously releasing more lightning strikes. The entire sky was connected with lightning and electric beams. Countless lightning bolts as big as an arm crawl thickly. This commotion had energy that was able to shatter people's minds. DeCarlos also looked heavy. He had used his strongest attack and sent countless spaces like big nets over the giant worm. He wanted to confine the worm in his space energy. Shi Yang saw the worm being covered inside dozens of spaces that then connected and strengthened each other. It was like someone being confined inside a steel cage. Then, they used another bigger steel cage to cover that cage, and it went on to so many layers. However, the big worm was still moving as if nothing had happened. Shi Yang could see the worm getting angry through dozens of clear space confinements. It was like an enraged beast. Then, he saw DeCarlos's pale, blood trickling down the corner of his eyes. The worm only wiggled and it could hurt DeCarlos severely. It had damaged the soul of this expert at second sky of Immortal Realm. Only DeCarlos knew that many layers of space confinements that he had placed on the worm were shattering rapidly. Every time one of them broke, it felt like a dagger was stabbing his brain. It was so painful that he couldn't help it. "What is this thing after all?" DeCarlos shouted. He tried to think while blood oozed out of the 7 holes on his face. He was shocked when he thought of a possibility. Would it be that thing? DeCarlos changed his face, his eyes so frightened. Seconds later, he screamed. "Lei Di, we can't counter this. I'm taking you out of here. Chapter 1334, Creatures of the Absolute Beginning. Chapter 1334, Creatures of the Absolute Beginning. DeCarlos shouted and hurried toward Lady. He wanted to leave immediately. He had even ignored the layers of space confining the massive worm. DeCarlos, what's the heck is that? Lady shook his dragon's head. The dim lightning bolts shot out of his silver body and swarmed toward the worm. Don't waste your energy. We can't deal with it. DeCarlos was still bleeding. He looked helter-skelter and he forced smile. At the same time, Shi Yang's countenance changed. He looked extremely panic-stricken. The ring spirit Ming Hao had restricted was screaming inside the blood vein ring as it had just received an unknown force. His soul moved into the blood vein ring. He then found so many complex barriers and restrictions inside the blood vein ring. Those barriers layered and shrouded a grey soul. That grey soul should be the ring spirit. When the layers of complicated barriers were like mirrors with so many cracks, the ring spirit's aura inside the seal became fiercer. This ring spirit wasn't the original one. Xian Shan had used the origin of ancient god continent to guide it here. It would be a soul from another universe like Shi Yang. It had swallowed the genuine ring spirit and schemed to take his soul. Later on, its ambition grew bigger as it wanted to collect bloodthirsty remains to resurrect itself. Ming Hao had used his supernatural power to seal that thing inside the ring. However, under some special circumstances, it could contact Shi Yang. However, the restriction Ming Hao had created was torn now. The ring spirit was wiggling to get rid of it. DeCarlos was screaming as he couldn't resist the giant worm. Shi Yang became more restless. He knew that it wouldn't turn out well at all. He pondered for a few seconds and then rose one hand, creating a magical vortex by him. You should return to Grace Mainland first. He rose his hand and sent a tender force at Xia Xinyang, pushing her into the vortex. He didn't give her time to prepare. At the same time, he touched his glabella. His host soul emerged from his forehead. The blood mark on the host soul's forehead radiated a beam of strange blood light. It was like a signal sent to a mysterious, unknown place. A blood light descended from the sky and fell to the devouring island in the center in the blood sea, bloodthirsty forces forbidden land. A message came out like a furious current. Xian He and Frederick immediately found it. They changed their face and immediately took action. Shortly afterward, swoosh, a strange light appeared by Shi Yang. Then, a dark soul emerged and turned into a soul clone of Ming Hao. After 2 flashes, Xian He and Frederick appeared, their faces grave. As long as Ming Hao arrived, he saw DeCarlos bleeding and ready to take Lady away in fear. Ming Hao was bewildered. He muttered, "Brother." DeCarlos halted for a moment. He turned to look at him and shouted, "I don't have an excellent brother like you, DeCarlos." Lady thundered, his dragon body struggling. "What are you afraid of?" Xian He and Frederick looked at Shi Yang, or the blood vein ring on his finger to be exact. Xian He said, "Is that ring spirit about to get rid of the seal?" Shi Yang nodded and said to Ming Hao, "The seal you've set up was well made. However, it suddenly shakes a lot now." Ming Hao wore a dark face, snatched the blood vein ring, and sent a wisp of his soul into it. His face changed immediately and he looked at the giant worm. He closed his eyes as if he was considering something. Then, he opened his eyes, looked at DeCarlos, and said, "Brother, is it the thing Master used to tell us?" This time, DeCarlos didn't shout at him. He nodded with a bitter face. "It should be." Xian He, Frederick didn't get it. They looked at Ming Hao and DeCarlos, trying to guess what they had mentioned. Ming Hao grimaced as DeCarlos confirmed it. He said in a low-pitched and stern voice, "That thing is trying to affect the ring spirit. It seems to help the ring spirit to escape." People were bewildered listening to him. Ming Hao frowned, "Don't look at me. I don't know what's going on. I don't know the relationship between that evil thing and the ring spirit." "What's that?" asked Xian He. While they were talking, the massive worm was struggling hard to get rid of DeCarlos's layers of spatial confinement. Its planet-like body convulsed, but its aura was blocked. Only De Carlos could perceive it, so only he had to endure it. De Carlos shook as if he got hit hard in his chest. His ashen face had more cuts. He suddenly screamed, "My genuine space seal can't hold it longer. I want to dismiss the barriers. Guys, get ready." "What's that thing?" Xian He and Frederick looked at Ming Hao and shouted at the same time. "A creature from the absolute beginning," answered Ming Hao. Xian He, Frederick, Lei Di, and Shi Yang were perplexed. Apparently, they had never heard about this before. Netherworld lock armor. Ming Hao hadn't explained it to them yet. With a grim face, he drew the dark souls out of his eyes. Shortly after, hundreds of thousands of spirits bobbed like an entire sea, moving towards De Carlos's space confinement. Together, they had magically improved the genuine space confinement. Surprisingly, most of the spirits were at original God realm or ethereal God realm. They had even seen incipient God realm souls. No one knew how many brutal karmas Ming Hao had created throughout these years to gather this horde of souls. Innumerable souls created a chain armor that covered the space barriers and strengthened De Carlos's seal. De Carlos's grimaced face became a little better when the souls supported his seal. He took a deep breath to recover and then said, "With the three of you here, we can confine this immemorial creature. Anyway, I'm sure we can't destroy it and we don't know how long we can keep it here." Shi Yang dropped his jaw. After Ming Hao, Xian He, and Frederick came here, they had 5 experts at second sky of immortal realm. This force was enough to clear any other force in this universe, except for the God Clan's force. However, this force was only enough to confine that thing here, and De Carlos said that they couldn't do that for a long time. What was going on here? More strangely, Ming Hao agreed with his assumption. He said, "Brother, you're correct. We can only hold it here for dozens of years. It's almost impossible to kill it. What's that after all?" Lei Di turned into a massive lightning beam. After a flash, he turned into his humanoid form, his face impatient and restless. Heavenly Monster Tribe, Immortal Demon Clan, Imperial Dark Tribe, and God Clan have a history of only 100,000 years. The earliest time recorded in your history is 100,000 years ago. De Carlos looked at Lei Di and said begrudgingly. "However, there's an era called the Absolute Beginning before that. There were creatures in that era and moreover, they were beyond our knowledge. They were the creatures from the Absolute Beginning." Shi Yang and the others were stunned. Although my teacher was killed by Bloodthirsty, he was still the warrior with the best space power Upanishad in this world. He had never stopped exploring space. He knew many marvelous and old secrets in this world. He had told us the stories of the Absolute Beginning era. De Carlos frowned. The creatures in that era were very, very powerful. They said that at the beginning, this universe was hundreds of thousands of times bigger than the present one. The star areas were like drops in the sea. My teacher said that because of the competition between the creatures of the Absolute Beginning, it shrunk to the current size of the cosmos. The creatures living in that era were much more giant than the members of Heavenly Monster Tribe. Also, they were spectacular, indeed. Their bodies could look like a mountain or even a sea. Sometimes, a planet can be a creature from that era. They were so massive and their life almost didn't have an end. They knew the original power of the universe. Their competencies were something we could never imagine. "So, from what you've said, what's desolate?" intervened Shi Yang. "Good guess. Desolate is a creature from the Absolute Beginning era." Ming Hao looked at him. Shi Yang was stunned as if his soul got hit. "I can even tell you something. Grace Mainland, Ancient God Continent, Ancient Demon Continent, and God-blessed Mainland used to be parts of Desolate. It's like a person who has a head and 4 limbs. Desolate is the he, and the other continents are its limbs. They used to be one, but they got hurt. Something we could never imagine had cut them and separated them like that," snorted De Carlos. This time, even Xian He, Frederick, and Lei Di looked frightened. Xian He looked at Ming Hao. He was so confused. After he pulled himself together, he turned to ask Ming Hao. Did he tell the truth? Ming Hao kept silent for a while before speaking. I don't know if it's true or not. These things are what my teacher had concluded a long time ago. I've been trying to prove them in the past 10,000 years. I don't dare to confirm anything, but I know it's the closest to the truth. At least, we all know that Desolate has its own consciousness. Because it got terribly hurt, it has turned eccentric like that. Desolate is an absolute beginning creature, and so is that thing. None of us have ever fought or talked to them. However, my teacher told us that the absolute beginning creatures were invincible and only the other absolute beginning creatures could counter it, DeCarlo said sternly. True then, Shi Yang spoke again, another soul of mine gave me a familiar feeling about that thing. It seems to recognize it. Instantly, everybody turned to focus on him. Ming Hao looked a little touched as he said, "We've almost forgotten that you had Grace Mainland's origin. If my teacher assumed correctly, as you fused with Grace Mainland, you have a wisp of Desolate's detached soul. It's not strange that you have a familiar feeling about them." Pondering for a while, he turned to DeCarlos. "Brother, you said that nobody had actually fought or talked with the creatures from the absolute beginning era. You're wrong. Someone did, and he even managed to win." "Who?" DeCarlos was astounded. "My former master." Chapter 1335, Living in the Sheep Pasture. Chapter 1335, Living in the Sheep Pasture. Ming Hao's former master was bloodthirsty, obviously. He was the most difficult riddle in the vast sea of star in the past dozens of thousands of years. He was also the strongest warrior that people had acknowledged. DeCarlos and Lei Di changed their countenances slightly. Even Xian He and Frederick were baffled. They asked bewilderedly, "How come we never knew this? So then why I'm the leader of the Cortege of 8 and not you two?" Ming Hao threw them a glance and said deliberately. Xian He and Frederick snorted at the same time. "Is it true that Bloodthirsty used to fight the creature from the absolute beginning? He won?" DeCarlos was so astounded. Ming Hao nodded, talking. "It's true. The mysterious power he got also comes from that victory. I guess he got it from the absolute beginning creature he had defeated." People looked horror-struck. Shi Yang also discolored in fear. He felt shocked. Rumor said that only Bloodthirsty understood and used that kind of anonymous energy. After 10,000 years, the leading forces like the God Clan, the Thousand Fantasy Sect, the Broken Hall, and the Heaven River Temple had kept Bloodthirsty's remains to decode the mystery of that energy. However, until now, no one had figured out how to use that energy. Shi Yang knew that this kind of power was absolutely dangerous. It was perhaps the core power that helped Bloodthirsty rule the world. To get this power, the God Clan had united the big forces to kill Bloodthirsty. Anyway, they hadn't made any progress in explaining the nature of that power. Until now, no one knew where Bloodthirsty came from or where he got the Devouring and the other 8 Great Power Upanishads. Before Bloodthirsty, the Devouring and the 8 Great Power Upanishad hadn't existed in this cosmos. Bloodthirsty's existence had spread out the great powers. However, what had actually frightened the strongest experts was another power that Bloodthirsty controlled. It was even more mysterious to find the origin of that power. Listening to Ming Hao, everybody was perplexed because it was inexplicable to them. People who knew Ming Hao knew that he would never talk nonsense. Normally, his conclusion was the result of many years of observing and thorough investigations. If he said something, it was the closest to the truth. Unexpectedly, that kind of energy came from an absolute beginning creature. Lei Di, DeCarlos, Xian He, and Ming Hao had the dazzling light shoot out of their eyes when they looked at the massive worm. It seemed like they were stirred up. However, shortly after, they discolored in fear. The giant worm under layers of barriers began to struggle hard one more time. While it was wiggling, it murmured something. It was some sort of soul language that had never existed in this universe. Its voice whined and sounded archaic. Amazingly, it could get through Ming Hao and DeCarlos' seals to expand to the world outside. It was like using the soul to summon something. P2E. DeCarlos couldn't help but spurt blood. He looked paler as he screamed in fear. "It's calling for more of its kind." Ming Hao in the soul form twisted as if he also got hurt. He cried, Xian He, Frederick. Seal it now. Okay. Xian He and Frederick nodded resolutely, their eyes slightly excited. They urged their power immediately. An immense blood sea overflowed from Xian He's incipient extent that was vast and thick with the isolated, deadly aura. However, inside the sea, the life energy burst out vigorously. The sea acted as a blood membrane and covered the giant worm. Frederick grinned strangely. The pale white wisps of core chi condensed and expanded like a thick white smog. Inside the curtain of smog was the glimpse of millions of white gravestones. They looked like the cold, silent mountains of the demons and ghosts after tens of thousands of years. The white gravestones inside the white smog were made of the corpse chi arrayed in the ancient formation that could destroy the world. Millions of tombstone were planted in the cold and deadly mist. They pressed down on the worm and tried to confine it. At the same time, Lei Di thundered his dragon roar. He opened his mouth and spurted dozens of thousands of small thunder dragons made of lightning and electric beams. They were like fierce lightning ropes tying the worm. De Carlos, Ming Hao, Xian He, Frederick, and Lei Di were the 5 existences at the immortal realm. No one could resist this force in this world. If they had strike a star area, it would be enough to destroy it instantly, killing countless life stars and creatures. Under the fierce attack of such force, Shi Yang was affected as he had only second sky of incipient God realm cultivation base. He stood aside and watched. He felt frightened as if his soul altar could be shattered in any minute by the shockwaves. Almost instantly, he had turned into the immortal demon body. The shield became his armor. Shi Yang had to gather the god power in his body to create layers of protection. He looked like a bloody rock that could resist all kind of shockwaves. He pulled himself together to look at the massive worm. He felt so insecure as if something went wrong. The chaotic space basin didn't have borders or limits. It was infinite, indeed. Then, something strange happened in the area pretty far from where Shi Yang and the others were. Deep inside a space current was a place packed with countless dark clouds with disgusting meatballs inside. While the gigantic worm was murmuring, millions of dark clouds here began to move and gathered. Shortly afterward, they became a massive worm as big as an entire planet. The same change happened not only in that area. Just like that, there were 10 more colossal worms that appeared in the chaotic space basin. They were all so gigantic. The 12 giant worms with similar size filled different areas of the space current. While De Carlos, Lei Di, Ming Hao, and the others were attacking one of them, the other 11 hissed angrily. Their voices became high, shrieking as if they were outraged. The surface of each worm in the other areas began to ripple. The ripples were like waves of magical space energy. The outer space divine light shot out of their body. They gathered and made a magical, bright-colored bridge. Right then, 11 massive worms wiggled and entered the bridge and disappeared. Ancient God Continent. Inside the God Zenith, God Lord who had occupied Haig's body was hovering in the middle of a sea of essence, chi and flesh. Countless corpses from different races bobbed in that sea. They could see the warriors of the human clan, monster clan, demon clan, dark spirit clan, ice clan, and so many others in that sea. Most of them had at least original God realm cultivation base when they were still alive. There were more than millions of corpses packed in the place. All of them looked ash-gray as if they didn't have a beam of life in them. The God Lord hovered above the sea. The pores in his entire body opened to suck the surging essence, chi and energy from the bodies. He was recovering his energy at the quickest speed. All of a sudden, his closed eyes opened. The sun, moon, and stars moved inside his eyes radiantly. Master, Heavenly King Light kneeled by him and lifted up his face to watch his lord. Why do you wake up all of a sudden? The God Lord looked cold. He threw the other a glance and then said casually, summon Carefree, Divine Marshal, and Easygoing. Ask them to come here at the fastest speed. Something earth-shaking is about to happen. Heavenly King Light didn't ask further. He immediately used his soul to send his message to every corner of Ancient Godstar area. In a corner of Ancient Godstar area on a freezing lunar star, Carefree was holding the moon nucleus in his hand. He was about to teach Ouyang Luo Shuang. But he suddenly shook and said to her, "You cultivate here alone. I have to go now. I have something very important to do." On a life star of the Brahmos family in an inn inside a typical city, there was a stunningly handsome man sitting with two beautiful ladies with vulgar clothes on his chest. As he was having fun, a light flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, he disappeared into thin as if he had never been there. The current chief of the Charteris family, Charlint, was in a secret chamber together with some elders. They were listening to a handsome man's teaching about the marvelous features of power Upanishads and how to break through to the immortal realm. That man had a cold face like ice, his aura as sharp as a blade. Suddenly, he was startled, lowering his voice. "Master called me." He disappeared even before his voice had vanished, leaving a group of panic-stricken members of Charteris family in the secret chamber. They didn't know what happened. Carefree, easygoing, and divine martial, the three heavenly kings had dropped all of their work when they received Light's call. They were heading to ancient God continent at max speed. Just like three shooting lights in the middle of the universe, they could cross billions of miles and pass the sparkling stars after a breath. Shortly after, the three heavenly kings landed on ancient God continent inside the God Zenith. They kneeled down in front of the God Lord. They kept their heads lower and didn't ask a question. Just like the most loyal servants, they were waiting for their master's orders. 100,000 years ago, we had joined many experts to kill Bloodthirsty. We succeeded. Before he died, Bloodthirsty talked to me privately. "What he told me has bothered me for so many years and I will never forget it," said the God Lord indifferently, his eyes rippling with many inexplicable waves of energy. The four heavenly kings slightly lifted up their heads and looked at him suspiciously, waiting for his further explanations. We all know that at ethereal God realm, the soul altar has the ethereal extent. After the warrior has entered incipient God realm, the ethereal extent will evolve to the incipient extent. The incipient extent is an independent space that can contain mountains or rivers. The most refined and advanced ones can even have planets. After reaching the immortal realm, the incipient extent will be developed one more time. It won't be different from the real world at that time. Even if we die, our incipient extent can remain independently. I heard that after the immortal realm, the incipient extent still could develop further. At that time, it could produce lives. The God Lord looked at the four and said, "Real lives. Living beings. The high-level living beings like us could be produced in an incipient extent of someone whose realm is higher than immortal realm." The four heavenly kings looked baffled. The God Lord intendedly paused for a while. He suddenly had a bitter gleam flashing on his face. "Have you ever thought that our God clan, heavenly monster tribe, imperial dark tribe, and immortal demon tribe, are living in someone's incipient extent? Before he died, Bloodthirsty told me that I'm pathetic. I'm just a sheep in someone's pasture. The only thing that makes us different from the others is that we have a good shape with better vision. However, we are still the sheep. In nature, we're no different from the others." Chapter 1336, The Unsolved Riddle. Chapter 1336, The Unsolved Riddle. The four heavenly kings were baffled listening to the God Lord. They felt like their souls were baptized unknowingly by a fiery flood. "Master, you meant, the star area where we've ruled for 10,000 years and the universe we live are only things from someone's incipient extent? Like our incipient extent?" Carefree looked perplexed and absent-minded. He had lived for 10,000 years but now, he was suddenly downcast. Carefree, divine martial, and Light looked dumbstruck. The four heavenly kings were at the same position with the cortege of 8. In this vast sea of stars, each of them was a miracle and an undying legend. Their existences could be considered eternal. However, at this moment, all of them were too shocked they had even felt hurt. "Yeah, like that," the God Lord sounded indifferent. "I've been thinking about Bloodthirsty's last words for many years. I think I got it now. Bloodthirsty deserved our respect when he just surpassed the immortal realm. If he had had more time and chances, He could have broken this incipient extent to get rid of the prison. Then, he could have flown freely to the world out there. Pausing for a while, the God-Lord said, "He was killed in the end, but we didn't destroy him. The real owner of this universe had used our hands to kill him." The four heavenly kings still looked baffled. The God-Lord sighed and nodded to them. "Without the experience on Desolate 10,000 years ago, if I hadn't had the Genesis fruit, how could our clan have risen? How could I have led the experts to kill him?" Listening to him, the four heavenly kings were shaken. They screamed, "You mean, Desolate is? It's the thing that owns this universe. Although it got hurt and divided, Desolate is the brain. It created this universe. Our God clan and the other three big clans were created by the four wisps of its soul. Inside Desolate is the fountainhead of power Upanishads. All of our power Upanishads come from there. Desolate is the principle and the truth of this cosmos. Just like the way we control our incipient extent, it can rule all creatures in this universe. It can rule over us. However, its body was divided into 5 parts, leaving it in such a wounded condition and puzzle consciousness. Otherwise, Bloodthirsty couldn't have existed. It wouldn't have used our hands to fulfill its wish. Pausing for a while, God-Lord continued, "Lives and souls born in this universe have its seal when they are born. It's what makes us pathetic. We will be bound to this place. It can control us because those are the rules. Just like we can wreak havoc in our incipient extent, it can destroy the world with a flicker of its mind. Bloodthirst's dramatic fate occurred because he was born in this cosmos, so he got its mark on his soul too. If not, with Bloodthirst's power, it would have been enough for him to break out of this prison to fly in the real vast universe," sighed God-Lord. Bloodthirst's devouring power Upanishad and the other 8 power Upanishad had never existed here before him. Where did he get them? Easygoing was skeptical. Desolate is a creature from the absolute beginning era, but it isn't the only one here. The Bloodthirsty Force's holy land, the Dark Abyss, is also a creature from the absolute beginning era. That creature has the form of the cosmic black hole. It can devour everything. "Have you ever seen the Dark Abyss swallow the life stars?" said the God-Lord. The four heavenly kings were puzzled. Light asked, "Didn't Bloodthirsty use his devouring power Upanishad to do that?" "That Dark Abyss is an absolute beginning creature. Bloodthirsty got his devouring power Upanishad and the 8 power Upanishads from that creature. However, Bloodthirsty was created by the blood of the God clan, Immortal Demon clan, Heavenly Monster tribe, and Imperial Dark tribe. Bloodthirsty should be the first creature that Desolate had ever produced, I think. Anyway, no one knows why the Dark Abyss gave him the power Upanishads. These things remain as an unsolved riddle. I have spent 10,000 years to think, but I haven't gotten anything yet." God-Lord shook his head. "So why did you summon us, Master?" asked Carefree. "Besides Desolate and the Dark Abyss we've known, another absolute beginning creature has been awakened. This creature has resided scatteringly inside the space basin. When I broke through to third sky of Immortal Realm, I'd encountered it there. I didn't know what it was at that time, though. When Bloodthirsty told me his last words, I finally understood it after so many years," said God-Lord. "There's another creature from the absolute beginning era." The four heavenly kings were frightened. "That thing stays in many different corners of the chaotic space basin. It used to be wounded seriously. That's why it has been sleeping for billions of years. Gradually, after a long time of accumulating energy, it has woken up. In fact, it needed a couple 100 million years to wake up completely. Perhaps this cosmos will be gone and we won't exist anymore. However, someone has provoked it and woken it up." God-Lord's eyes flashed. "Our old friends are there. They're about to receive its wrath. What we need to do now is to wait patiently for a chance. I've been recovering my power for a long time, but I have just reached second sky of Immortal Realm. If we can kill that thing and absorb its soul, I can recover my full energy and I can even break the Immortal Realm. At that time, I will have the power to break this prison and Desolate's rule. It will make me a creature from the absolute beginning era too. Even if Desolate recovers fully, I think I can resist it." The four heavenly kings were excited. The god blood in their body seemed to boil, their fighting will rising unceasingly. Almost at the same time in the spacious subterranean palace on the Tsunami Star, the 4 immortal realm experts including Tian Xie, the president of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, Caesar, Ling Xiong, and Lorraine were discussing some crucial matters. They were talking about their great scheme to make the bloodthirsty force and the god clan risk their lives together, giving them the opportunity to become the new overlords of this cosmos. While discussing, Tian Xie suddenly turned abnormal. A strange light shot out of his eyes together with so many symbols moving inside his pupils. Beams of bright divine light radiated from Tian Xie's body like rainbows twirling around him. It was extremely magnificent. Tian Xie was talking, but he then stopped with a puzzled face as if he didn't hear what Caesar, Ling Xiong, and Lorraine were discussing. Tian Xie, Tian Xie. The other 3 couldn't help but call him to wake him up and continue their meeting. Tian Xie was still indifferent. Not many people knew that Tian Xie's power Upanishad was exactly like Zi Yaro's, which was from the divine light. In fact, each generation of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce had cultivated many different auxiliary power Upanishads. In fact, many people who knew Tian Xie only thought that he had mastered the fire power Upanishad because he was an outstanding blacksmith himself. However, Caesar, Ling Xiong, and Lorraine knew that Tian Xie had a special power Upanishad, which was his main power. It was the divine light power Upanishad that was similar to the god clan's light power Upanishad. However, its mysterious abilities were totally different. At this moment, divine light radiated from Tian Xie. The mysterious symbols moved in his eyes and he gradually murmured something unclear. This kind of murmuring was some sort of archaic language that even Caesar, Ling Xiong, and Lorraine, who had extraordinary knowledge, didn't understand. One thing they knew, Tian Xie acted so strangely now. It looked like he had fallen into the bedevilment, resulted from his failed cultivation. Ling Xiong and the others were stern. They discussed to see what they should do. However, Tian Xie then looked like he got lightning in his head. The puzzled look disappeared from his eyes. He resumed his sound mind. He pondered for a few seconds and then said, "I don't feel well. Please leave me alone for a while. Wait for me, please." Then, Tian Xie flashed and disappeared from the room. He reappeared in the deepest place inside his underground palace, which was the place he hid the jade coffin. The walls of this room were covered with mysterious and complex drawings and formations. A pond was situated in the middle with the strange and marvelous power. The light shadows blended together in that pond and made it an incredible door to some place. As soon as Tian Xie appeared in the chamber, he immediately sank into the pond and coughed a lot. After each cough, his body twitched as if something was trying to invade his body. His face became so cold and clear, which was similar to Zi Yaro's previously. He looked cold and arrogant like a god looking at his creatures without any human emotions. The pond where he was soaking had many strange images of vague giant worms. No one knew where they were headed. Waves of cold energy came. Beams of brilliant light shot out from the pond and entered Tian Xie's body. The energy rippling from him now was so terrifying. If he let them continue to expand, they could destroy Tsunami Star entirely. So many mysterious symbols flew out of the walls. Millions of them became a thick mesh net that covered the palace to shield it from the energy-attacking wave from Tian Xie's body. The terrifying energy that could destroy Tsunami Star was forced to stay within Tian Xie's body. He shrieked painfully like a beast in a disastrous situation. His body exploded and bled hard. It looked like he would die in the next second. It seemed like he was undergoing some incredible transformation. Chaotic space basin. Ming Hao, Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, and Lei Di, the 5 immortal realm experts, had joined hands to subdue the giant worm. They all looked serious as if they were facing the strongest enemy in their entire life. Every time the big worm moved, the 5 of them were shaken hard as if they got hammered in the chest. They looked helter-skelter, indeed. Shi Yang couldn't join the battle at such a level. He could only watch them. He looked horror-struck as he had never thought that there was something in this universe that could resist the joined force of 5 immortal realm experts. He had an extremely insecure feeling as he could feel the danger coming closer. This sensitive feeling came from his co-soul and shook him entirely. He didn't know what would happen. Everything here had surpassed his knowledge. What Ming Hao and DeCarlos said had destroyed his knowledge accumulated until now. Crack, crack. Suddenly, the noises came from the blood vein ring in Ming Hao's hand. Ming Hao had taken the blood vein ring to seal the ring spirit one more time. But because of the giant worm that had hurt DeCarlos, he had to turn and deal with the worm. Shi Yang didn't know if he had finished casting or improving the seal. But now, when the blood vein ring sounded strange, Ming Hao utterly grimaced. Shi Yang's face also changed. He suddenly remembered what Ming Hao had said. Ming Hao said that the colossal worm seemed to help the ring spirit break the seal. Chapter 1337, Doomsday is Coming. Chapter 1337, Doomsday is Coming. Crack. The blood vein ring sounded like an eggshell shattering. Ming Hao hadn't reacted when a blood light shot out and disappeared altogether with the blood vein ring. The ring spirit had broken the seal. Ming Hao was using his full force to seal the worm, so he couldn't do anything. He turned grimaced and bewildered. It looked like he got hit hard as his soul-like body faded all of a sudden. He was shaken and his soul was wounded because of the big worm struggling. He pulled himself together quickly and called Shi Yang. Check where it went. Shi Yang flickered his mind and sent his soul consciousness away. Just like he had sent an army of billions of fish in this space, his wisps of soul consciousness tried to see to which direction the ring spirit and the blood vein ring had gone. Unfortunately, the ring spirit and the blood vein ring didn't leave a bit of aura. The faint connection between Shi Yang and the ring spirit was cut off utterly. It has escaped the turbulent space current. I don't know where it went. I've lost the connection completely. After a while, Shi Yang replied, his eyes solemn. He knew the ring spirit was also a soul from another universe. It was mysterious and no one had known anything about it yet. However, deep in this chaotic space basin, the giant worm could affect the ring spirit and help it lift the seal. Shi Yang found it was extremely inexplicable. Is it true that the ring spirit and the giant worm have some connection? Is it something that they've planned beforehand? Otherwise, why did the worm have to help the ring spirit get rid of the seal? Layers of riddles filled Shi Yang's mind. For the time being, he felt like he was hovering in the middle of some foggy space. Not good. It's increasing its power. What's going on? Xian he had transformed into his immortal demon body. His entire body now had spikes, his eyes as crimson as blood. Around him were rivers that carried energy fluctuations of death and life. He was urging his power to swarm over the worm. However, he didn't look at ease at all. Quite the contrary, he screamed in fear. DeCarlos, Lady, and Frederick also said that they realized that the worm was increasing its energy unceasingly. Deep inside Ming Hao's dark eyes was a magical, floating light. It was the connection with innumerable wisps of his soul. After a while, his soul-like body shook violently as he spoke with fear. The entire universe is changing dramatically. DeCarlos flickered his soul consciousness hearing that. He was shocked too. Oh my God. Xian He, Lady, and Frederick looked at them, their faces asking and worried. Brother, you try all of your power to hold it. I'm going to show them what's going on out there, said Ming Hao. Both of his hands pulled the void as if he was making a mirror that could reflect the entire sky. Different galaxies appeared in the mirror. Currently, there was the same worm in each area that was identical to the one they were fighting here. Those worms moved around the sea of stars and invaded many high-level life stars. They had released sticky tentacles, drawing and swallowing so many warriors. 11 giant worms were attacking 11 high-level star areas. Surprisingly, they were in the battlefields where the bloodthirsty force and the God clan were fighting against each other. Each worm was even bigger than a planet. They had earth-shaking power, indeed. As soon as they emerged, they had subdued all outstanding warriors of those high-level star areas. Slowly, they invaded the star areas like it was doomsday, swallowing all creatures. The giant worms had countless tentacles jutting out of the bodies together with many mouths on bodies. Ming Hao's mirror was clear enough, as the experts here could even see the despair on the victims' faces and their extremely helpless screams. Even giant worms had invaded 11 high-level star areas and taken down the life stars. In the middle of the universe, doomsday seemed to have come to many star areas. No one knew how or why the giant worms arrived. Anyway, in this moment, everybody was filled with terror. Thus, the aura of the massive worm made them so feeble that they couldn't even have a thought of resisting. It was the aura that was beyond their worst imagination. The entire sea of stars was boiling because of the giant worms. The experts of the bloodthirsty force and the God clan stopped their fight to report to their leaders. Why are there 11 more worms? Xian he soaked in the blood sea, his entire body was red as he shouted in fear. Lady, Ming Hao, and Frederick looked at DeCarlos. I should have thought about this earlier. DeCarlos looked bitter. I've seen many places with similar clouds in the chaotic space basin. However, I hadn't thought that they could fuse and create those terrifying creatures. Not 11. They are one. They're like my soul, which are the clones of the same body. It's like 4 ancient continents detached from desolate. They have the same aura and soul energy fluctuations. They are one. 11 worms have swallowed the warriors in the other areas. It leads to the energy increase of the worm we're dealing with here. They can transfer the energy to each other, Ming Hao said sternly. Shi Yang nodded. He could see that the 12 worms were actually just one. They had been scattered in different areas in this space basin to capture warriors who had accidentally got in here, taking their energy to recover. It was the same principle as Ming Hao's souls could transfer energy to each other. The thing they called the absolute beginning creature could do the same. It could do even more. Its 12 selves had the same aura and energy fluctuations. There is a barrier between our space and the chaotic space basin. There are barriers between the galaxies too. How could they get there easily? We understand the power of those barriers. Without the right method, it's not easy to cross. Something is wrong here. If it can get in easily like that, it should have done that earlier. Why would it wait until now? Asked DeCarlos. The sea territories of those 11 star areas are destroyed. The space passages were torn open in just a blink of an eye. Those sea territories are utterly destroyed. Ming Hao squinted, his face dark and sinister. Currently, there is only one who can do that in this vast universe. Tian Xie. DeCarlos changed his visage. As he used to be an honored member of Tsunami Chamber of Commerce, Tian Xie respected him a lot. He knew the competence of Chamber of Commerce. In this vast sea of stars, only Tsunami Chamber of Commerce was capable of destroying the sea territories of 11 star areas at the same time. Even the God Clan and the Bloodthirsty Force couldn't do that. Those star areas had always put up guard against the God Clan and the Bloodthirsty Force. Only Tsunami Chamber of Commerce could use its trading activities to cover for its real operation in the sea territories without being noticed. That's how it could break the sea territory abruptly like that. The sea territory was the entrance to a star area. As it was destroyed through some special method, all the space passages opened wide, which was enough to let the giant worms come through. DeCarlo's scream had intensified people's complexions. Tian Xie was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. He controlled a domineering force in this cosmos. No one knew why he had opened the sea territories to welcome the gigantic worms. However, his cooperation had helped the worms get into the place without a single obstacle. And now, the ring spirit had broken the seal and run away. 11 worms were invading the star areas, and the one they were confining here was struggling to get out. After each second, the massive worm's energy increased even further. Obviously, it didn't need much time to get rid of the confinement and counterattack. Doomsday is coming. DeCarlos looked worried, as if he didn't have any trick to perform now. We can't put up with it anymore. We shouldn't have provoked this creature from the absolute beginning era. We should have let it sleep. He regretted, but it was too late now. As it had escalated to this, everything seemed to get stuck and they couldn't do anything to help it anymore. This one is the brain. As long as we can destroy it, we can solve the problem. Ming Hao suddenly got his sound mind back. It's really hard to seal the creatures from the absolute beginning. It's almost impossible to destroy them utterly. I think you understand this. De Carlos gave a forced smile. Then we should hurt it badly, said Ming Hao. Any solution? De Carlos shook his head. Ming Hao pondered for a while as if he had finally made up his mind. Yeah, I have a solution, but I don't know what it would result in. However, this is an emergency situation. We can only try. Xian He, Shi Yang, and the others had their eyes brightened when they looked at him. Everybody knew that Ming Hao would never shoot an arrow without a target. If he said he got a solution, it was 100% true. However, this worm was so formidable. They couldn't seal it even if they joined hands. What kind of solution did he get to wound it? Everybody was so curious that they could die just to know how. I'll find you guys a person. Ming Hao's eyes changed. His usage of space power Upanishad wasn't weaker than De Carlos's. He had created a sparkling door and sent a wisp of his soul consciousness through the door. A silhouette emerged from the door. Shi Yang was surprised. He couldn't help but shout. Wedderson. Surprisingly, it was Wedderson, the one who had almost obliterate Fiery Rainstar area, the hybrid between the man tribe and the god tribe. He had terrifying energy with the aura from Gaddo, the chief of Corrosion Force. What did you call me for? You've saved my mother and our Manstar, but I only agreed to help you deal with the God Clan. There's no God Clan here. After Wedderson got out, he looked impatient with a murderous aura. He had traveled a long way to return to his homeland to save his mother and his fellows from the Breckelfeld family's slaughter. However, after he had arrived, he found that the Breckelfeld family had already ordered to murder his tribe. Ming Hao, who had observed every move of his secretly, had saved them beforehand. Of course, he did that to have Wedderson on his side. Wedderson was grateful. He told Ming Hao that he would go against the God Clan. What Shi Yang had thought was that Ming Hao had helped him achieve and arrange properly. He thought he had successfully recruited Wedderson. Because of many killed Man tribe's warriors in Wedderson's homeland, his resentment at the God Clan had totally burst out. His name is Wedderson. When he was small, his appearance was different from the others of his own kind because of his god bloodline. The elders of the tribe had abandoned him in a pond on Manstar. He had absorbed all the erosive liquid in the ponds. That liquid had Gaddo's blood and the power from our master's remains. Ming Hao looked at Shi Yang and said, "Give me master's remains." In this universe, only Wedderson can currently take in the energy from master's remains. After he takes in the energy, he can release the erosive energy ultimately. Even if he can't melt down this giant worm, he still can hurt it a lot. Chapter 1338, Frantic Bursting. Chapter 1338, Frantic Bursting. Wedderson would never forget what happened to him when he was just a little child. That event had changed his life forever and predestined him to not be ordinary. He was born a mixed-blood between the God Clan and Man tribe. When he was a small child, he looked much thinner and more handsome than any other kid in the tribe. He was weak, but he knew how to use earth and heaven energy to create a strange magnetic field that could control things. His special deadly field power Upanishad didn't help him earn respect. Instead, it made him an alien in his own tribe. After the elders checked his blood, they found that he wasn't pure. They thought that he was a monster, so they abandoned him in the deadly swamp area. The water in the warm was filled with acid poison. Even warriors of the Man tribe were eroded to death if they fell into the swamp. When Wedderson was too young to understand how cruel people could be, he was thrown there. They let him survive on his own. As soon as he got into the swamp, he had to taste the most dangerous agony in this world. His body slowly eroded and dissolved. However, facing death with a lot of screams, he had survived unknowingly. He could even feel all the poisonous water in the swamp that had been drawn into his body. This process took 3 years. 3 years later, the swamp dried up. Wedderson returned and destroyed the elders who had thrown him there. With his unrivaled power, he became the top warrior of the Man tribe. Eventually, he became the lord and the Man king of the Man tribe. Shi Yang, give him master's remains. Let him absorb them. Only when he becomes mad and triggers the power from Master's remains can he erode this absolute beginning creature, said Ming Hao. Shi Yang was surprised. Xian He and the others looked stern and heavy. They were surprised and they looked at Ming Hao, expecting a clearer explanation. Gado died utterly that year. Ming Hao looked at the others. Before he died, Gado had received Master's remains. He died on the Man Star, Wedison's homeland, in a low-level, rural star area. He died with Master's remains. However, his power Upanishad was very special. After he died, his corrosion power Upanishad remained and covered Master's remains. After so many years, Gado's corrosive power had successfully dissolved that piece of Master. Gado's power and body were dissolved in that swamp area. Thus, that swamp was the essence of his corrosion power Upanishad, which had continuously eroded Master's remains. When Wedison was abandoned there, it was the moment the corrosion power Upanishad had finally melted Master's bone. He was so lucky. He should have been dissolved there. No one knows how he could absorb all the essence of the swamp and get Gado's power into his blood and flesh altogether with the power from Master's bone. It's also the reason why he can reach the immortal realm power level when he bursts out his frantic power despite the fact that he is at second sky of incipient God realm cultivation base. What has bestowed him the terrifying energy isn't Gado's corrosion power Upanishad. It's the power from Master's bone. Ming Hao told them what he had concluded and assumed. People were looking at Wedison as if he was a dormant demon that could destroy the entire world when he got mad. In fact, when he was in Fiery Rainstar area, if they let Wedison continue to be in his frenzy, he could have destroyed the entire Fiery Rainstar area. All was because of the power in Bloodthirstis remains. Right now, the absolute beginning creature that had been dormant in the chaotic space basin for billions of years and was much older than the four great creatures was awakened. It was as powerful as a destructive god. The other 11 clones of it were annihilating the 11 star areas at the same time. Its host body here had its energy increase massively and continuously. Ming Hao and the others failed to seal it. It seemed like no one could subdue this thing in this vast universe. Ming Hao was begrudging. Eventually, he had to take out the furious bomb, Wedison. He had told everyone what had happened to him and now, he wanted to use Wedison's magical power to damage this creature from the absolute beginning era. Listening to him, Wedison looked grief-stricken. Slowly, a harsh light appeared in his eyes. Why do I have to help you guys? How do I know if you are telling the truth? If you don't cooperate with us, everyone here and many more living in the 11 star areas will be destroyed. Perhaps this entire universe will collapse. Your family can't survive this disaster. Ming Hao's cold voice chilled people's hearts. He looked at Wedison and said simply. He rose one hand and gestured a touch. The images in the space mirror became clear again. In 11 star areas, the giant worms had attacked each of the lively life stars. Their tentacles tied the warriors and drew them into the stomachs. The warriors there had to suffer from tragic deaths. Wedison looked at the mirror, his face cold. After a while, he turned to Shi Yang. The others also turned to Shi Yang. These pieces of remains are taken from Ling Xiong, Caesar, and Lorraine. I intended to bring them back to the Holy Land. But now, it seems like they have a much more important role here. Shi Yang touched his forehead and 3 jade boxes flew out of his incipient extent. The boxes with Bloodthirstis remains fell on Wedison. Wedison rose his hands to receive, his face cold and dark. However, a magical light shot out of his eyes when he touched the boxes. Oh, I feel close to the things inside the boxes. Everybody was shocked. How should I absorb them? He looked at Ming Hao. I don't know. No one has ever successfully figured out the secret of Master's remains. The ones who got the remains have spent 10,000 years to study. Unfortunately, even the God Lords failed. You're the only one who has succeeded. I can feel Master's aura from you. I think you should figure out how to absorb them yourself, said Ming Hao sadly. Wedison was stunned. During this time, the worms struggled harder. Xian He, Frederick, De Carlos, Ming Hao, and Lei Di had to focus wholeheartedly to arrange more barriers. The rivers with the power of death and life, billions of soul wisps, thunder dragons, different spaces, and cork-chi ropes tied the worm. The 5 of them wore stern faces as they were under tremendous pressure. Lei had turned into his dragon form, roaring and thundering. Apparently, they had to endure a harder resistance from the worm. Then, a graceful body emerged from one of the meat lumps of the giant worm. Her cold eyes didn't convey any human emotions. She was arrogantly and proudly looked at the others. She spoke a strange, unknown language, piercing through layers of barriers to reach 11-star areas. It was Zi Yao. She stood on the giant worm as if she was standing on the summit of an imposing mountain. Compared to the worm, she was so minute, but her eyes and her posture said that she was the master. The beautiful divine lights were like 5-colored clouds that wound around her body and made her extremely beautiful. She suddenly turned to look at Shi Yang, her eyes showing some strange emotion. Her lips parted as she said one word that was different from all known languages. But Shi Yang understood. That word was desolate. Zi Yao called him desolate. Boom. His co-soul deep in the core of Grace Mainland had come to Shi Yang's soul altar quickly after it had pierced through layers of barriers. The clusters of heaven flame supported the co-soul. The co-soul floating above the flames was like a more magnificent flame releasing dazzling and formidable energy. That energy surged and washed around Grace Mainland, shaking the peripheral area. "Don't look at her," Ming Hao shouted, his saber-like voice stabbing Shi Yang's brain. Shi Yang felt so cold. He woke up and bit the tip of his tongue. His immortal demon blood turned into a warm current and released his whole body energy in just a blink of an eye. "Sink!" He screamed in his soul. The co-soul from the soul altar directly flew into his incipient extent and turned into a vast sea of fire there. The co-soul had shut itself down. After the co-soul had entered his incipient extent, it cut off all kinds of connection. He didn't hear Zi Yao's voice anymore. When he couldn't understand her voice, the feeling of his soul shattering disappeared. He suddenly felt like he survived a disaster. He knew that if he hadn't been resolute enough to send the co-soul to his incipient extent to cut off the connection with the other could invade his soul and burst off his host soul and co-soul. He didn't dare to look at Zi Yao anymore, not even a glance. He forced himself to focus on Wedison. Then, Wedison had opened all the 3 jade boxes. Strangely, the invisible pieces of bloodthirstis remains had become visible after he touched them. Right after that, Wedison decided to apply the most direct method. He put the bone into his mouth and swallowed directly without even chewing. The massive bone moved through his throat to the stomach. This horrible scene made Shi Yang sweat in fear. He thought that the bone could tear the man's throat in any minute. Wedison swallowed 3 pieces of bloodthirstis remains at once. "Don't you want to chew it a little bit?" Shi Yang asked, feeling strange and chilled. "Can't chew." Wedison had to wiggle to swallow the bones. He answered with a red face full of wrath. Then, his belly ballooned. It was ballooning at a speed that naked eye could observe. It was like the process of a 9-month pregnancy shortened within several seconds. Wedison's stomach became swollen and sounded strange. Wedison paled immediately, clutching his stomach and screaming as if a beast was dying. His voice was earth-shaking, indeed. He was drowned into madness again. His body became taller and the waves of earth-destroying erosive energy diffused from him. He was many times stronger than when he was in fiery Rainstar area. After he had swallowed 3 pieces of bloodthirstis remains, he seemed to turn into some sort of monster. The formidable aura on his body increased continuously as if it would never stop. It was much faster than the increasing speed of the worm's energy. It was horrifying to the others. Roar. Wedison roared and shrieked. His body seemed to explode. The pores in his entire body frantically emitted erosive gas that blended in his special deadly field. Everything expanded in just a blink of an eye. "Scatter. Stay behind the worm. Let the worm bear his erosive energy," Ming Hao shouted ear-piercingly. Everybody hurried. They didn't hesitate to dodge the spear. All moved at their fastest speed to hide behind the giant worm and let it face Wedison. "You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.